All right, welcome. We're here is the November 2023 edition of the Audio Programmer Meetup. As you know, my name is Josh, and I'm here with some very special guests from around the world. So I have Jens in Denmark. We have Adam and Nolan here in the US with me, though in different parts. And we have Niels, who's back, and he is in the Netherlands. And if you didn't catch our talk from last Friday for the Audio Programmer podcast, be sure to check it out. A lot of really cool things in there about game audio, about IDEs, about coding styles, a lot of useful bits there if you're just getting started. So before we get started, just want to remind you about the Audio Programmer community. So it's a place where we all connect to talk about all things audio programming. Come and join us on our Discord. We're getting right there to 10,000 members. We're right on the cusp of 10,000 members. So maybe I'll do something special for the 10,000th member of our Discord. Join us, theaudioprogrammer.com/community. And with that, we got some exciting talks coming up today. We're going to talk about building audio programming teams with Jens. And then we're going to talk about synthesizers. We're going to take a journey into the land of synthesizers and how to create them. We're going to do that with the rest of the crew here. So we'll go ahead and we'll start off with Jens. He's going to talk about building a global audio programming team. And he's bringing over 20 years of experience to discuss this and share his insights. So over to you, Jens.
Thank you very much, Josh. Yes, I'll just share my screen here. I have a little bit of presentation prepared, so let's see if we can do that. So can you all see my screen there, guys?
Yes.
Great. All right.
Is that AI?
So yes, yeah, all the images in this presentation are AI generated. I find that generates really good graphics for presentations like this. So enjoy the images here throughout the presentation.
Thank you. Okay.
Yes, thanks Josh for having me. I've been really looking forward to presenting here and also give a bit of a different perspective from I think from on this audio programming community. I've about myself. I live here in Aarhus in Denmark, and I've as Josh said, about 20 years experience in audio software, mostly working in TC Electronics and recently Music Tribe. And currently I'm involved in a small startup called XMT Audio. I work with plugins, I work with bass amplifiers, effect pedals, and apps. And in the past 10 years, I've been concentrating on what I call team leadership or team coaching, and doing that for the past 10 years. I haven't touched the code in a while, so you have to bear with me on that. Regarding process, weapon of choice is Scrum. I use Scrum on various different projects throughout my career, and I've been lucky enough to work on a few greenfield projects. That is where you get to build a brand new software platform and architecture from scratch, and also building a team and the processes around that team, and define the product vision and the product roadmap together with the stakeholders. So I've done that a couple of times, and 2 years ago, I got the opportunity to start a new business area within Music Tribe, and we were going to build a suite of software products from the ground up. And to begin with, I had one developer assigned to the project, so that it clearly wasn't enough to get us going. So I needed to build a new team from ground up. So this presentation is primarily based on my experience with establishing this team. And some of what I tell you here today might, sound trivial, but I think it's nevertheless important. And many of the things I'm going to say here are also not specific for remote teams or for audio programming teams, but I still feel like they're really, really important. So that's why they're here in the presentation. All right. So when you're building a team, no matter remote or not, it's the first things you write people on the bus, to quote Jim Collins from Good to Great. And how do you do that? How do you make sure you get the right people on the bus? Well, we were in a situation here where we had a pure software project, so we were able to go for a global hiring, like a fully remote team without any co-location at all. And that really opens up the opportunity to target exactly the right people for the project, the people with the right skills and the right mindset. So there's a couple of things that you need to be aware of, though. Yeah, first thing is when you're doing global hiring, you need to know the capabilities of your organization. How and where can you actually hire? Which countries do you have payment offices in, for example? Do you want to bring people on as contractors or full-time employees? It depends also on your situation and your company and the size of your project and the timeline of your project, I guess. But one thing that you can consider nowadays, I wish I'd known that 2 years ago, but there's actually some solutions out there that handle that now, like global HR solutions like remote.com, which is a fantastic initiative where you can actually set up payment solutions for people in more than 40 countries. So if I'd known about that 2 years ago, I would have been super happy. But you learn as you go. And another thing you want to consider is time zones. When you're establishing a global team, you want to make sure that you have a team that can work within, various time zones, and that you can get them to coordinate at least once a day. So that's a thing to consider at least. Yes. So once you have that settled down, you can go ahead and start advertising for people. And there are, of course, various online job boards. And what you want to do first is put the job ad on your company website and on LinkedIn. And there's some good job boards around. If you're looking specifically for audio programmers, Juice has a fantastic job board. And also here on the Audio Programmer has a really good job board where you can post jobs that you have open. Also, I've used those like scouting for good people on LinkedIn and also on the various Facebook groups. There's one called the Audio Plugin Coders Guild, where there's a lot of good people as well. A lot of hobbyists there, but also a lot of semi-pro guys there that are actually really great. So some hints to where you can get people with the right skills. One thing you want to be aware about when you're advertising for people is that you advertise for specific skills, especially when you're hiring globally. If you just put an ad up for a C++ programmer, you're absolutely sure to get swamped. You will be swamped with applications. We made that mistake at one point. We had like 300 applications a day, and there's no way you're going to be able to sort through that. We had to close that down and write a new job post where we were a lot more specific with the skills that we needed. So put something like Juice or DSP experience in there if that's what you're looking for. Yeah. So once you got the applications rolling in, you want to sort them and select the people that you want to interview. And I really like to involve the team in how we want to grow the team and how we want to strengthen the competences that we need on the team. And so say we have we need knowledge about a specific area of DSP coding. Well, then we'll probably start looking for a person that has that experience. So that's why I think it's important to do this in collaboration with the team. You can also sometimes when you talk about these things, you find out that a team member wants to move in a certain direction and expand his skill set in that direction. So you will need to supply the team in a different direction. Yes, for the first interview, I always use like a stepwise interview process, no matter where I'm hiring, remotely or not. But for the first interview, I want to. That's usually just me talking to the candidate, and I want to ensure the right attitude and the right fit with the team. Of course, I want to also get a feel for this person's skill set, but the attitude is super important, and the fit with the team. Does this person feel like he has a personality that will fit with the rest of the team? I put in here in the presentation, attitude is larger than skills, and I sincerely mean that, because you don't definitely want to find people with the right attitude. And when you're hiring globally, it's possible. So for the second interview, I usually invite one of the other team members along so that we, can drill down deeper in the technical stuff and ensure that the skill set is actually right. I have been wrong a couple of times on that, so I really, appreciate having a second opinion on board from one of the team members. Yeah. Also, I think it's super important here to set the stage and align the expectations when you're hiring. So if you're looking for someone to code UI, for example, it's important that you actually get a person that's interested in coding UI. When you are advertising in this world of audio programming, I've gotten a lot of applications for people who are interested in the actual DSP processing itself. But if that's not what you're looking for, then you don't want to hire a DSP programmer, because although he says, well, hey, I'm interested to join just because you're in an audio company, right? Then if you get a DSP programmer and assign him to just program UI, he's going to lose interest, and that's not going to be a good fit. So say as much as you can about the project and the work at hand, and ensure that the candidate is actually interested in doing the work that's required. Yes, so once you have assembled a team, or at least have more than one person on the team, as soon as you have two people on the team, you want to get the processes up and running. And I call it kickstarting the Scrum engine, because I use this Scrum engine as a way of driving the projects forward and get the features implemented. So first things I do is set up the daily stand-up. It's the core ritual of Scrum. Set up the daily standard, and for that, I allowed the team here to coordinate themselves. When do they want to do the daily stand-up in the day? Also because we are spanning with this team 12 and a half hours in time zones. So it was important for me that everyone felt comfortable with the time that we selected. And luckily, Bapuji in India, he was there and said, I don't mind going in the evening. I work from home anyway. And Landon in the US, he was like, I don't mind getting up in the morning. So that settled quite quickly, and we settled on a good time for the daily stand-up. I think it's important that the team meets daily and coordinates, and that everyone is there, so that you get this cross-team coordination going. And it's also important as a team leader to have the daily stand-up, so that you can see if anyone needs help or anyone needs guidance, or if anyone is stuck on something, that you can say, hey, how about you guys sit together and prepare a program on this? Yes. Also, it's super important that everyone on the team understands the long-term product vision, and where are we going on a longer term, say in 1 year, where do we want to be with our project, and also on the shorter term, the next sprint and the next few sprints, what do we want to focus on in that shorter term. I tend to repeat that a lot when talking to the team, and also that goes into our Scrum process with the sprint planning and the sprint review and so on. Yeah, it's also important to be very clear on the roles on the team, and I've covered in this team, I've covered the roles of Scrum Master and Product Owner. And I've been responsible for the backlog and for setting up the backlog and aligning the overall product vision with the stakeholders, and then setting up the backlog and trimming that. And the team has been responsible for the code and the code base. So I haven't touched the code. I have some ideas about the architecture and so on, but generally it's a team that owns the architecture and owns the code, and they need to coordinate and solve things between them. Yes. So once we have established the backlog for the first couple of sprints, then we're ready to get going, and then we will groom the backlog as we go along. About grooming the backlog, this is also not specific for remote teams, but there is a little bit of specificness here. I always coach in a feature-driven approach for attacking a backlog. So your backlog should be derived from what kind of products are we doing, and then breaking that down into features, and then breaking the features into user stories and breaking that into tasks. So that's the kind of the hierarchy there in the backlog. And some of the products on the backlog, or the features on the backlog, they might be like big chunks of work that we haven't groomed, but we still have them in the backlog. And then the things that we are going to work on in the short term, we go through them, we break them down, we estimate them in more detail. And I try to always have the team estimate items as we create them, because that's way easier than having created a long backlog and then we don't have any estimates on them. So we also set up this 1 hour weekly grooming meeting for doing exactly that. So we would take the backlog, look at it, and say, okay, in the next couple of features that we're going to be working on these and that, we need to break them down into stories and so on and so forth. And then how does the architecture then evolve? Well, the architecture is also like a feature-driven architecture. I really encourage that in the team, that they build what is necessary to solve the features that we're working on. And then if we see that we need to build something once, we build it once. If we build it twice, then, well, we probably need to do some refactoring. If we're building 3 times, then this is a piece of common infrastructure, and it needs to go into our common infrastructure folder, and it becomes a piece of infrastructure that we can always take out and use in other products. So that's kind of how the architecture evolves in a feature-driven way. Yeah. When you're running a remote team, digital collaboration tools are essential. And of course, we need messaging, and we need video calls. It's what we use on a daily basis for video calls for our daily stand-up. And we need to have a messaging system where we can always get in touch with each other. Right? Hey guys, I'm struggling with this and that. I need help. Can someone help me in the team? And usually people will chime in a few minutes, and there will be someone with a solution there. There's a lot of good tools out there. Discord is one. Teams is another. We were using Teams, which is a great tool as well. So there's a few of those tools out there that does this really well. And another thing that you need is a code repository and a build server, and you need that for any software project these days, no matter where it's remote or co-located, but it's essential to have. And you also need a project planning tool. In this case, you can't just use a sticky board that sits in the room. You need an online project planning tool. And a couple of tools that people like are Jira, and also we used Azure DevOps for this, where it actually combines the project planning tool and the code repository and the build server, and actually also the test pipelines and all that into one package, which is a very nice package that I would recommend any day. We also need some common file storage, and it's important that we are not just sharing documents and emails or just via chat or whatever, but we actually try to keep one version of the truth, and especially in documentation and design documents and so on, so that we know where is the truth actually, and what are the specifications and so on. There's some good tools out there for that as well. Then there's something specific to audio, I guess. It's audio sharing for demos. It's really important that we can share audio in high quality with each other, and to some extent it works through Zoom and through Teams. But we found that if you want to be sure, that you have to use a solution like we found Audio Movers to be a really good solution, where you can run it as a plugin inside your DAW, and it streams audio to anyone you send the link to. And that has worked really well for us when doing demos to each other online. Yeah. So when the team is not together, it becomes extra important to facilitate communication. And I already mentioned a couple of ways to facilitate that communication. Daily stand-up is one, but I also encourage the team to reach out to each other at any time, and also reach out to me anytime, so that we can help each other, and that it feels like there shouldn't be a barrier to write to each other or to just take a video call if needed and so on. A lot of times when we got to daily stand-up, I would hear that the team had actually already coordinated during the day, which is fantastic. I always encourage that. And then we would set up, I would set up weekly one-on-ones with everyone on the team. So I had a chance to also get a feel for where are the guys and are they doing well? And also not without any specific agenda, and just saying, okay, so what did you do on the weekend? And sometimes we talk about work, sometimes we talk about vacations, and just to get a feel for how they are doing, really. We also set up a Friday team time, which is an hour every Friday to just get together and have Friday beers. Or for Landon, it was I don't know. I don't think he drinks coffee, but a root beer in the morning, and for Puji, a cup of tea in the evening, and that worked really well. And it was also no agenda, just talk about what are we doing on the weekends, and does anyone have any, like, holiday photos to share, or we'd go explore on Google Maps and show each other around and so on. So that was great. Also, we are using the sprint retrospectives as also like a social thing to talk about how we were doing with process-wise, and how can we improve, how can we get better, how can we make the coming sprints even more efficient and enjoyable. Also, when the teams are when they're not meeting anyone else from the organization in the hallways or at the coffee machine, they do become kind of isolated from the rest of the organization. Therefore, it's an important responsibility for the team leader to establish that communication into the organization. So I would typically know a lot more people in the organization, and I would know that, hey, there's someone over there working on something similar that we are working on. Maybe we should set up a call so you guys get to know each other, and so on and so forth. So I would facilitate a lot of that communication, not working as a relay station, but actually setting up the one-to-one peer communication between the members on my team and the rest of the organization. Yeah. So I'm going to talk about values, and it's kind of like it's kind of like a worn-out word in a way, but I do think it's important to know what values are you navigating from. And I've found these values here to be true, and to really foster a good team. So when you've made an effort to hire the best people you could possibly get, both skill-wise and also best fit with the team, the worst thing you can do is start to micromanage them. So you want to trust people that they're doing their best to get things done. So when we set up the planning, when we agreed on what we're going to work on, I trust that people are actually working on what they're working on. I can't go and look over their shoulder, but I would never do that anyways. I trust that these guys are actually working on what we agreed that they should be working on. Also say that it's okay to get stuck. It's okay to fail, as long as you ask for help or raise your hand and say, hey, we're stuck on this, we need help or whatever. So when some things go wrong or not working, then you don't assign blame. You want to involve the team, and you want to seek out solutions, and you want to encourage discussions among the team members with the eyes on the ball, and with mutual respect for each other's talents and also limitations, and get to the best possible solution. And I find that work really, really well with fostering this culture of mutual respect and mutual trust between the team members. Yeah, then wrote focus and openness. Openness is always like also saying, hey, I need help, or being open about what you're working on, or being open about what doesn't work, and keeping the eyes on the ball, and really wanting to deliver the best product and focus on what's working and what's not. The focus part is also sticking to the plan, working what we have agreed on, and not working on anything else. There might be some features or products that are further out in the future on our backlog. But that's not for now. We're not going to work on that now. We're going to work on what we agreed on this sprint, and the next sprint and the coming sprint and so forth. So that's about keeping the focus here. And if you foster a culture of that, then you're setting the team up for greatness. Also being customer centric, always thinking in the place of the customer. And for a lot of people working in audio programming, that's easy because we are users ourselves of the software. But sometimes you can get a little, too involved in your own designs and think that something that you have built is intuitive, and it's actually not. So you want also to have your colleagues test what you are actually doing, and also have your product owner test what you're doing, and someone outside the team maybe test what you're doing. Yeah. But when you foster this culture and start living these values, what you will get is a high performing team. So I've seen this happen several times, and this is really what you want to do. And what does it then feel to be on a team like that? Well, it should feel like I'm going to work to meet with my friends and build some awesome products. That's what it should feel like to go to work, in my opinion. Yeah. So from that, getting to a little bit of a comparison between co-located and remote teams. What are the actual differences? And definitely there's there need for more social rituals, because you don't have the coffee machine talks and the meeting in the hallway. So you need to actually establish them as more structured, a more structured thing to get the same kind of communication going. So it's a lot harder to read the room. Although we have our cameras turned on, I always encourage the guys to turn on your camera so we can see each other and see our facial expressions and all that. But it does become harder to read the room, and I don't actually know how tall the people are, and if they're sitting there in the underwear and just wearing a t-shirt. I don't know. So it does become a little bit harder to read the room. Yeah. So a question here: is it more effective, more efficient? I definitely believe that working remotely is more efficient. So you get more quiet time to work on the problem, to actually work on the code without any disturbances and interruptions. But what you have to be aware of is that you facilitate this communication between the team members. Otherwise, you will end up in being very, very efficient, but not as effective. So what you want to be is effective. You want the end result to make the customers happy, and that's what you want in the end. It doesn't matter how many lines of code you produce to do that. So that does require the intercommunication on the team and all the surroundings around it. Yes. Also, a question I posed here is hybrid teams. I work with co-located teams and I work with fully remote teams, but I've actually never worked with a hybrid team where some of the people are in one location and some of the people are remote. And I'm having a bit of a hard time imagining that working really well. It has worked really well to have a co-located team, and it has worked really well for me to have a fully remote team, but I'm not sure about the hybrid team situation. And then one really, really big question that I would love any input on is how to buy cake for the team, because there's a lot of times that I've sat there and said, well, guys, this is one of the moments where I would definitely have bought you cake, but I don't know how. So if anyone has a solution about how to remotely buy cake for the team, I'm happy to hear about it. Yes. So I have brought a couple of statements from the guys on the team, and I'm just going to read them out loud, because this says something about what it feels like to be on a team like this. So Oscar says, if the right people are involved, any high-performing team could succeed with a good leader and clearly defined goals, no matter the different time zones or cultures involved. And Landon says, my experience with being part of the team has been fantastic. Despite being thousands of miles away, I was able to effectively communicate and collaborate with the team. We were always willing to support each other and let the team members own a certain feature or bug. Benzer says, I felt empowered to question the existing processes, which led to a valuable learning experience for all of us as we explored better workflows for our product development. And Mike says, an environment of trust, respect, and open communication, enabling team members to thrive and contribute our unique talents. Our team not only achieved constantly their goals, but also developed a sense of camaraderie and shared purpose. So with that, I want to say thank you. Thank you for letting me join here on the Audio Programmer and share this with you today. And I definitely want to say thanks to the team that I worked with over the past 2 years here, Bapuji, Landon, Benz, Oscar, Mike, and Willem. And also I want to extend a thank you to Ben Booker and the Face Solo team at Music Tribe, with whom we have collaborated very closely. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jens. That was a fantastic presentation that resonates very well with some of the things that I try to focus on as well. There are some questions, and I have a bunch of questions as a person who is passionate about this side as well. But I'll start with the questions from the chat. CG asks, what would you say are the most relevant hard skills for candidates to have nowadays? Are there any specific recommended programming languages to be learned?
Well, I would say C++ is still big in audio programming. So that kind of answers the language question. But there's a lot of skills that go around it. And, people are also starting to build UIs, especially in other frameworks. And there's also the entire setting up of build systems and so on. So, which is a really important factor to be aware of. That, as I said before, it's probably only about 5 or 10% of an audio product that is the actual audio processing. And then the rest of it is building it into a product. And that takes a lot of other skills than just hardcore DSP programming skills.
Fantastic. So one question that I had, as I'm waiting for more questions from the chat, so if you have questions, please feel free to ask. One question that I had was about stand-ups. So me personally, so it sounds like you're very pro meeting. Sounds like you love bonding, you love having a number of meetings where you bond. I hate to say this, but I'm kind of anti-meeting. I try to keep, so I'm curious to hear your counterpoint to this. So from my perspective, I feel like developers are happiest when they're developing, and that I think there's a balance of trying to pull people in to make sure that they're on track with vision and that they're on track with product. But to me, 9 times out of 10, developers who are not actively coding and actively, doing what they do best, a lot of them they hate to be stuck in meetings. So one thing that I was curious about, just to get to a specific question, was how you manage your stand-ups, because I find, for me especially, stand-ups are a time where everybody gets together, and the next thing you know, somebody's talking about what they've done this weekend, somebody's talking about what their dog is doing, and it's just an opportunity where things just go out of control. You start, somebody is discussing a project, the next thing you know, somebody else chimes in and they say, oh, but have you considered this idea? And the next thing you know, the meeting is going on. So that's a long question, but would love to hear your thoughts about that.
Yeah, and this goes whether you're a co-located team or whether you're a remote team, it's the same thing that happens. And it's just setting the stage, right, to from the get-go, set the stage and say, we are the daily stand-up, it takes 15 minutes. There's no more time for it. So we after 15 minutes, we close the meeting. So there's no more time for it. So you have to answer these 2 questions, or 3 questions. What did I do since yesterday? What I'm going to do until tomorrow? And then is there anything blocking me? And is anything in the way? Do I need help? Right. So that's the three questions you need to answer. And to begin with, you have to be really like sensei kind of. You need to do as I say, wax on, wax off, and then once you go through the motions a couple of times, you'll sort of learn it, and then it's no big deal. Then that's just how you do it, right? So that's always when coaching a team or training a team in Scrum or any process. Really, you really have to be kind of sensei to begin with, and until it feels natural for everyone to do it. And some teams, they are really bad at it, and you need to do it again and again and again and again. But you do need to do it, so it doesn't drag on. Because, and also instate the sometimes that you can give a yellow card or a timeout or something when, and or say I think it's you better take this afterwards. I think that's better, that you take this offline or whatever. So it becomes valid for anyone to just say that and say, can you take that offline, please? And then there's no worries about it.
Yeah.
Can I offer an observation?
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep it short. In 2006 or 2007, I'm not sure what the year was, I was a lead programmer for a conversion from a PC game to a Nintendo Wii game. And at that same time, we were also introduced to the Scrum methodology. Actually, for me, that was the first time, because like the game industry used to like lag a little bit behind in methodologies and all that kind of stuff. But eventually, just I have a lot to say about it. What helped us is keeping the stand-up an actual stand-up, because people don't want to sit down, don't want to stand up for 45 minutes. And just something simple like that helped us. Yeah. How do you feel about that?
That any tricks go. I mean, it's if that works for you. I also had ones that you have to. We all have to stand on one leg for the entire stand up. That keeps it short, right? So any tricks to actually keep it short and keep it on time is goes in my book. So that's really great. Good input.
I love that. I love that. It sounds like you really add a great family element to your to the teams that you lead, which sounds really fun.
Yeah, so, just to address what you said about meetings a little bit, I do instate these rituals with the Scrum rituals, and I also had these extra things that I instated to that we thought were actually necessary. But apart from that, I really backed off. I always really back off from the team, and I don't want to bother them with anything else. And if we discover that, well, we also need to talk about this and that every. So I would say, how often do we need to talk about this? Do we need to talk about it every day? No. Do we need to talk about it once a sprint? Yes. Okay, then let's tie it up with our sprint retrospective, for example. Then we remember to talk about it at our sprint retrospective. We'll tie it up with one of the rituals that we already have, and say we'll remember to address this every now and then. But tie it up to one of the rituals that we already have, so I don't need to bother the team with any more meetings, because I don't want to do that. I mean, you don't want to swamp the team with it. You really want to set the stage and then back off and let the team do that work, because as you say, they are happy is just programming away. And also coordinating between themselves. That's what I see, and asking for help between themselves. I don't want to. I just want to make sure that they're doing it. I don't want to be a relay station there. Definitely.
Yeah. What I've done as an alternative approach is I've done. If you're familiar with Cal Newport, he's written several books about productivity. What I do is I prefer office hours over meetings. So what I'll do is I'll say basically 9 to 11 my time every morning. If you need something, you can call me. You can call me about anything. We can sit down, but I don't like meeting just to be meeting and just sitting here saying, so what shall we talk about today? That's such a pet peeve of mine. So especially when it's just raining
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
bring
yeah, yeah.
down from every direction.
Yeah, exactly. You don't want to do that. Yeah, and sometimes we also had the one-on-ones, and we'd show up, and we were done in 5 minutes, and that was fine. It was just we didn't have any agenda, and if we were done in 5 minutes, perfectly fine. If we weren't, then we'll just continue for the time slot that we had allocated. So I wasn't like keeping people around. Not that I don't love to talk. I do love to talk, especially with the guys on the team, great guys. So but no, but it definitely, if you show up to the meetings and none of you have anything really to say and you just want to get stuck into working, then that's fine. I mean, just do that.
So Astrofy Brinny Beats asks, what do you think is the main benefit of retrospectives? In my experience, they tended to be just the thing we did, but didn't really provide any clear benefits for the team.
Yeah. So that's kind of what it says in the Scrum book, that the retrospective has to have action points, and you have to identify action points from the retrospective. Otherwise, they're useless. I mean, that you have to have, and that's what the whole point of them are. So we might just, of course, it's also about patting each other on the back and say, hey, we're really good at this and we're really good at that. But there's also to identify some problem areas and areas that where we want to improve, where we can say, hey, this can actually be improved, or and then we'll say, okay, so how do we improve it? How do we brainstorm on actually how we want to be improve that situation. And sometimes it might be a tweak in the pipeline, or it might be a tweak to the process. It might be something that we have to remember to talk about at sprint planning, or because maybe our task breakdown wasn't as good as it could have been. So I'll instate something and say, okay, can we do like quarter of an hour after our sprint planning to say, okay, we'll do it together, or I will check in and to see if you created tasks, or how should we do it? So we'll have a bit of brainstorms out of it, and then we reinstate that action in the next sprint. So we have to have like action points on the retrospective. Otherwise, they become just superfluous, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Another thing, just to ask you, or just offer a counterpoint on stand-ups. As you can see, I feel very strongly about this. I'm so anti-meeting. It's unbelievable, but I really appreciate having your counter approach, and that, I can see that you've studied Scrum quite heavily and that you really believe in this ideal. So I love just talking about this. And if I have myths or kind of beliefs that need to be kind of nullified or dispelled, I'm welcome to have them. But so another thing that I think in terms of stand-ups is, for me, so my role just throughout the different ventures that I do has been primarily as a strategist and just building teams. So for me, I feel like, is it important for me to know that you're having a problem with this particular thing on this particular compiler that isn't compiling for Linux? Is it important for me to know the details of that? Because from my perspective, I almost feel like that's, as a developer, in the development world, these are things that are par for the course. You're going to run into things you're always going to be running into a bunch of things. So I almost feel like I just need like a 5-second summary, like maybe not a 5-second summary, but maybe a 30-second summary. But I don't even need that every day. Just maybe once a week, or if it's something that really concerns the rest of the team. But I don't know if for me, I feel like I don't know if I need the whole team to be there to know about that particular pain point for a single developer. So do you feel that that's something that brings unity to the development team, just to have a good understanding of what's happening as a whole, or what's the benefit for you?
Yeah, I think that there's a difference between having a group of people working on different things that come together, and a team. Because the team, they have a common goal. that's what defines a team versus a group of people. So if you have a team that's working on a common goal, and in the sprint we have a couple of goals set up that the team are to accomplish, and they are helping each other do that. So they might have their specific technical in-depth areas that they're good at, but they are helping each other get there. So if someone is stuck on something, it might help that person to just explain the scenario or the situation to one of the other guys in the team, and try that approach and say, oh, now that I explain it to you, I now all of a sudden know what it is that I'm doing wrong. So facilitating those kinds of communication is important to me. And I think that that also just the brief summary you say, it just has to be like 30 seconds. That's all we need really to say. But the important thing to coordinate in the team is to say, I know what the guys are working on. I know what all of them are working. Not me as a Scrum Master, but the team members individually. They know what the others are working on, and they know if they need help. Or they say, hey, I actually know about that situation that you're dealing with there. So let me help you. Let's get together afterwards, and we can help each other out. So that's where it's really beneficial to have the dailies. And this team was also tasked with working on the same same products and same product portfolio, same features. So they were actually working on something that was very closely related. There was one guy who was really talented in building creating build pipelines or maintaining that sort of things, and there was another one who was really good at looking at getting all the DSP programming up and running. So they had their areas of expertise, but it was the combined effort of all of them that led to that we can demo a new feature at the end of each sprint. So I think that's where the daily comes into place in a good way, that you get the chance to say, I've done this since yesterday. Tomorrow I'm going to do that. Also as a reflection for yourself to say, what have I actually been working on since yesterday, and what am I actually going to do until tomorrow? And is there anything that's blocking me? Or now it's the third day in a row that I'm reporting the same thing. Seems like you're stuck with something. Can we do something to help with that? So I think that's where the value comes in. And it doesn't have to be that long, Josh. I know you have a different experience, but if you coach me to keep it short, I think it's worth it.
Yeah, definitely. I don't see any other questions in the chat, but I actually have a couple more questions. Like I said, this resonates with me.
Fire away, Josh. Fire away.
So another question that often comes up in software development is about scalability. So architecting code for scalability. So you were saying earlier about how you have, if you write something once, if you find yourself needing to rewrite something 2 or 3 times, then maybe you need to architect it a little bit better. So do you, in terms of your approach or the approach that you prefer with your experience, do you find that you really try to get it right the first time? It sounds like maybe the first time that you just build it for a purpose, but if you find that you need to build it again, then you take a step back and you look and you say, okay, so how can we sensibly architect this out and build this as a reusable piece of code? Is that how you normally handle it? I'd love to hear Neil's thoughts on this as well.
Yeah. If you take it to the extreme, right, and it's a balance. This building the, like I call it, organically evolving the architecture. That's what the term is. But if you take it to the extreme, then it should all be feature driven, and every single thing you do should be driven by we need to implement this next feature. I like that way of thinking, because otherwise you may end up over engineering things. You might end up overthinking what might we need somewhere out in the future, and generalizing for 25 different instances where it's not needed, right? So you overcomplicate things to begin with. So that's why I'm very much for the approach to say, okay, let's build the first things that we need to build. and then let's add some stuff to it, and let's make sure that it's easy to add new stuff to our architecture, that it's not complicated. It should be easy to add new features, and it should be easy to verify that adding those features hasn't broken anything. So building an architecture that works like that that's going to be your friend. It's going to be what propels you ahead and make sure that you can complete a lot of functionality fast, because in the end, that's what you want, to give your users a lot of functionality as soon as possible. So in the case where we were working on here, we actually had a good definition of our entire product portfolio to begin with. So it was tempting to just jump in and just, build the core first and then start building the products on top of it. But I really wanted to reverse that and say, okay, let's focus on one of the products. Let's build that first so it works with all the UI, everything should work. But keeping in mind that, of course, in a few minutes, we need to generalize it to 10 other products, right? So of course, there was some architecture that already evolved in the first product that we were developing, but definitely we refactored it a lot as we were going along. So after developing the first 3 products, we had a big refactoring, so that we allocated some time to say, okay, now we've learned a lot from developing these 3 products, so we need to do a refactoring and do some sweeping and do some generalization in the code so that we can scale a lot faster. To answer your question about scalability.
Yeah, Niels just wrote something in the chat, which is less lines of code, easier to change. I love that. That really, we had a great discussion about that on Friday as well. So it sounds like, like Niels was saying to me on Friday, he prefers more modularity in code, because then you can take a part out, if it's less lines of code, easier to change, better to scale. What do you think?
Like taking things to account that aren't relevant yet is a very crafty bullet to shoot yourself in the foot with. That's the way how I see it. But before I shut up again, I just want to say, Jens, a lot of things that you're saying resonate with me, and you're definitely, in my eyes, are showing how, like, the methodology that you're applying to your team has grown into a more mature methodology that actually works. That's not just textbook, we got to do this, we got to do that, but it adapts to the actuality of development. And that's all I wanted to say. It just happy to hear it.
Thank you, Niels.
I love that. Okay, one more question, then I'll go away, or we can get on to the next talk. So you were talking a little bit about the vision as a person who's the team lead. How do you set the vision for your team? Do you find that this is something that you set the tone, that you see it as your role to set the tone for them, and that they have input, but that you're kind of the heartbeat of that? Or do you find that you democratically you say, okay, people, we're all together. Hey, welcome. Okay, great. What do we think that we should do here? What do you think our values should be? How do you handle that?
Yeah. It depends a lot on where you are in your also your journey as a company, and as you can say, if you're a startup, then you're probably very much exploring to begin with, and exploring various directions, and is this what we want to do? Is this what we want to do? And then eventually something will crystallize out that we can agree, all of us can agree, that this seems like a really good idea. Let's go for it. Let's just do this. And then that starts to turn into a product idea. And then you can start working on it. Then you can start to build your backlog and work in that direction. And that's kind of then there might be another interesting idea over here that we're going to work on afterwards, and we might be shooting sort of in different directions, but eventually something will crystallize out, and they say this is going to be our identity. this is who we are as a little company, and this is also how our customers perceive us, and so on and so forth. I think that's what happens a lot of times with that. Working in a large organization is different, because then you have like a hierarchy of who decides where we want to go, right? So you typically have some business areas that are focusing on different customer groups and so on. And you might have a product manager who owns the product roadmap and says, after this product, we're going to do this product, and then we're going to do that product, and so on and so forth. Hopefully that's going to be a dialogue with the team, and everyone gets to contribute into that. But the product manager or the product owner is the owner of that, and has the final responsibility for building the product roadmap. So there's no doubt about that. Was also what I was trying to get at with the roles. There's no doubt that he's the one that has the responsibility for that, and to define that and define the product vision and say, well, I want to build the world's greatest chorus effects, for example. It's just an idea. So I want to build a catalog of chorus effects, and we are going to do it in hardware versions and software versions and so on and so forth. Might seem crazy, but that's his vision, right? And he owns the vision, and he owns the product portfolio, and gets the stakeholders to chip in on that and commit to that, and says, hey, we also think this is a good idea. And then we go together as a team, and then we say, okay, which product are we going to do in which order, and so on. We lay it out, and then we can start working. Then we can start building our backlogs. Then we can start, kick off our first sprint and so on. So that's the order we need to do that in. Yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, thanks for sharing your insights. Really awesome. Great.
And then sorry, just to add a little bit to that, as a team, team leader, or I also sometimes think of it as a bit of a shepherd for the team. You definitely also want to be fighting off the wolves. There's a lot of, in a large organization especially, there's going to be some fighting off the wolves, because there's going to be people with that will try to grab hold of you guys and say, hey, can I use this person for 2 weeks for another project, or can I and you say, well, we might be able to find something out, but it affects my timeline, and if we are going to do that, just be aware that that's what's going to happen. And then if you have that conversation, people then you're fighting off the wolves. The wolves tend to back off and say, oh, no, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to disturb you, and so on. So there's a bit of like protecting your team in that sense, again, especially in a large organization. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing. Great. Okay. So it sounds like a lot of people have really enjoyed that talk. And now we're going to shift gears from product and team management into the world of synthesizers. So next up is Niels Johannes de Wit, who is from the Netherlands, and he was with Build a Rocket Boy, which is a game company, so he has a lot of experience with game audio. But here today, he's going to talk about FM Bison, which is an open source synthesizer that he's built with Juice. And he's going to give us a walkthrough of the code, show us how the synthesizer works, show us some of the challenges he's found along the way, some of the unique aspects of the way that he's approached this. And so I'm also going to lean heavily on Adam and Nolan's experience, because they're going to be talking about their synthesizer as well. So as you go through, if there are any comments or any insights, please feel free to fire away. Over to you, Niels.
All right. Am I visible and audible?
Yes.
Great. So first of all, let me just clarify that I am probably the odd one out here. Yes, and like I told you in our earlier conversation, is that I come from a graphics and systems and performance programming background, and sure, I had a musical background going for me, and that eventually ended up in me trying to make a synthesizer. So that's something I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about today, and I would appreciate as many questions as you have, especially because I do not claim to be an expert at it at all. It did, however, help me to spend these years. I think it was like 4 or 5 years at least that I spent like just going from like I told you earlier, a sine wave rendered to a raw wave file to something that resembles a synthesizer, which now enables me to be combining my skills that I have in like 3D geometry and graphics and all that kind of stuff to apply it in areas like spatial audio and games and stuff like that. But okay, let's start with a synthesizer. Let's just launch it and yeah, let's go from there. Okay, share screen. No, I need to launch it first. Come on. There we are. I need to share it again because there we are. Okay. Do we see a synthesizer?
Yes.
All right. So let me first of all, this is a standalone version, which is kind of easy to work with right now. Explain that this is what I call a behemoth. It has more than 350 parameters. And basically all of them are temporarily interpolated. So like if you plug them into your DAW or anything like that, there will be no transients there, at least when of course there are bugs in here and we're still working on it, but basically everything it comes from a place where I really wanted to understand what I was doing. And the frustrating thing is that I still don't feel that I really know that I do. But okay, so let's see. We have no sample loaded here, or let's make sure of that. So let's just press the C note. That's a sine wave, isn't it? Now let's enable another operator. And let's not make it a carrier wave, but let's just say that we modulate, and this is phase modulation. So basically that's always been like the tricky thing. They call it frequency modulation, but with Yamaha it was basically phase modulation. So let's modulate operator 1 with 2. That sounds like shit. But then we have something called which like for example, the DX7 doesn't have. It has a singular output per operator, but we can say, okay, no, it's not a carrier, so I'm not going to hear, but we have the index, as it's called in FM nomenclature. Why am I hearing multiple things? Hang on. Hang on. Things always go wrong when you're doing it for the first time. Something's going wrong here. What the fuck is that? Sorry for my language. What's going wrong here? Okay. I don't understand why this is happening. Let's reset it again. Two sine waves, all right. Oh, wait. That was the problem, sorry. And that's inherent to the absolutely terrible interface that we have, as you can see, that I was modulating the first operator with itself. So that's why we got that feedback effect. So that's FM, right? And of course, when I started coding this thing, I wanted to know all kinds of different like filters and features and what have you. So one of the first things I did was add a little chorus. So that sounds a little better already. Then we have all kinds of controls. Are these, is the screen like very well visible, or is it too small?
No, it's good. It shows the whole synth. The writing, the font is a little bit small, but we can see the entire synth. So I think.
All right. So like for each operator, we have then, if you enable the carrier, there's the output slider here. And otherwise, there's the index, which is, like I said, FM nomenclature for the amount of modulation that you use, or that's basically a multiplier. But we have a ratio, a fine tuning, and luckily I put like tooltips, which is very 90s on everything. So these are the semitones fine tuning, and this is the octaves that you can tune it, and then there's detuned, which is in cents. And then there's velocity sensitivity. So this sounds equal no matter how hard I press the key. So I can modify that as well. And then there's a stored kind of filter that we can use. And we have panning and all that kind of stuff. So, but let's not spend too much time on that. Then on the right for each operator, there's something called that I actually took from the DX7. What you can do is that you can basically either linearly or exponentially, and I self my cut as well, decide how much fall off you have on the left or the right side of a certain key on your keyboard. And that's because I didn't like the introduction said that I was building a synthesizer with juice, but it's actually the other way around. I built a synthesizer in C++ first and wrote a wave out or direct sound. I'm not sure which one it was, and a MIDI interpreter, basically, both all in C++, and started working off of that until I had so many things going on that I was like, all right, I need an interface and an easy way, or a relatively easy way to make an interface. And that's where Juice came in, like the zero of the DSP, and I will show you shortly, or anything basically that creates the sound that you're hearing is taken from Juice. Okay, there was some Juice code in there in the past, but that's been replaced by now. Not because I don't like it per se, but I was kind of stubborn in the way that I wanted to find everything out myself. So okay, you have 6 operators. They can be stacked. They can be modulated with each other, as opposed to like a traditional FM synth. You can't just only modulate one operator with one below it. No, you can modulate them all together. And you can modulate one operator with 3 others, including itself, apparently, so as we just experienced. And instead of just having sine waves, I also experimented with different kind of oscillators. So let's just reset it again. And we have a sine wave. Then what I ran into was a thesis by a Swedish gentleman who wrote a thesis on the supersaw, which is in Holland very famous for our call it whatever you want, but trance sound. And I implemented that as well as an oscillator and made it to work so that it can actually modify on the fly. So this sounds like a normal saw wave, right? Starts a little less, then we tune up the mix, and these parameters are taken from the paper. And all right, I know that this playing doesn't make much sense, but it's just to give you an idea of how it sounds. And when you start stacking these things, it starts to get quite interesting. So this still is just a saw as well. So let's detune it a little bit and mix it a little bit. So that's typical Dutch trance for you. Another thing that, let me just load up another patch after this, is that I really try to do too much, basically. And that was both the charm and the downfall of the synthesizer. I mean, it also has monophonic mode, like works nicely. And there's, because it was meant to be an instrument, you have like not just like you can have different pedal types. Like you can control your auto effect with a pedal, the no sustain, or the piano version. And the piano version is actually like modeled after an actual piano, where like if you drop a key but you push the sustain pedal again, then it will continue on for a little while, or the plain synthesizer way. Otherwise, there's an envelope for each operator, just a standard envelope with a length and a delay, so you can kick them in a little bit later than the other ones. There's like sync and non-sync, ergo free running versus synchronized oscillators. Every operator also has a couple of filters that you can use in them. There's a pitch range, there's a master dB, there's a filter per voice as well, which also carries an envelope. There's a pitch envelope, but let's just load a sample and then I'll go to the code, because this can go on forever. Let's see. Let's just see if there's not anything new. Yeah, okay, there we go. So using this delay kind of thing that we have per operator, you can make like lush string pads as well that sound a little bit like this. So now let's get a little cheeky. as opposed to all these like kind of new age sounding pads, it can of course also do this. Let's go to the code, all right? Unless you have any more questions. I mean, there's just and I will gladly send you all any version that you would like to see of the synthesizer, because it compiles for Windows, Mac, VST3, standalone, AU, what have you. So let's switch over to Xcode, so we can like have a little bit of a journey through a code base. All right, so then I think I need to go back to Zoom and then stop sharing this one and share Xcode. Where is it? 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 Let's open. Yeah, there we go. Is this visible?
Yep.
All right, cool. So let's first go to the header file.
Can you make the font just a bit bigger so we can see it a little bit better?
Oh yes, of course. So what I always wanted is, especially because I worked on a hardware synthesizer before, one that you may or may not know. It's called the Tasty Chips GR1 granular synthesizer by Tasty Chips Electronics, which was actually what kind of rekindled my love for recording audio, even though I didn't know all that much about it. So this is basically all it is. We have a Bison class here, which is the basic interface. So you can set your sampling properties. There's some stuff that's not really relevant. Then there's a patch. I'll tell a little bit more about that later. Reset voices, reset the post pass. The post pass is basically what I showed earlier, which is a combination of the auto on vocalizer, delay, 24 decibel ladder filter, distortion / screamer, for which I use upsampling and downsampling to make it sound reasonably fair and good. There's reverb in there, and there's a compressor in there. And we also have things like acoustic decay and the behavior of the piano pedal system. But anyway, basically all you need to do is you need to fill in the parameters in the patch. And otherwise, there's just a simple interface with note on, note off, sustain, some things you can get like sample rate, number of samples per block, and what's the Nyquist rate of this certain instance, which is usually the same thing, just 22.5K. And that's basically all it is. And so how to go from here? The most essential thing is that that there's an idea here that it should have been an instrument, like I told you, and that means that I spent quite a lot of time, and I wish it would have been easier. Let's see, all your avatars are over there. But anyway, there's a system that handles key input, both for monophonic and polyphonic mode. And you can, like, when you're in polyphonic mode, you can you can slide like the amount of polyphony you have real time. From standard it's 32, but you can go up to 128 and probably more. But I never really saw the point to do that. And that took me a lot of time to make, actually, especially because when you get to like lower polyphony, like 16 keys or 10 or something like that, you also have to take into account the whole concept of voice stealing. And I have a heuristic for that. And it's basically based on what's like the the volume in there, and when was it triggered, and in that way they get ordered so that it can steal a voice. But what I always thought was very important for a synthesizer, is that it doesn't have any hiccups or transients. So even if a voice is stolen, there's always like a spare voice slot that I can use, and that spare voice slot can be used to, for example, say, all right, this note has to be killed within a certain amount of time, so that you don't get like wee click, but you wee. And of course, that's still a little bit of yeah, it's not the ideal solution, but that's the best I could come up with at the time. Now, let's leave the effects for what they are. I think it would be much easier, for me at least, if one of you could ask me a question to like guide me into what might be interesting about the synthesizer, and what you'd like to know first, like what was first.
Sure.
Yeah, please.
I guess so it seems like the DX7 was a big kind of inspiration on this synth. What else would you consider to be inspirations? And I guess how did specific things from those synths find their way into the code? Because I always feel like that's interesting.
Yes. So yeah, there are a few synthesizers that always interested me, and the DX7 was definitely one of them. Actually, there's like, for example, here there's an LFO to frequency table that was directly sampled from an actual DX7. So you can see how there's some legacy in there. But while I was coding the synthesizer, which was, and this is maybe an important step that and I can see my camera's out of focus again. I hate that. But anyway, the first step that I wanted to make is that, because I come from like a scene with that does demos and crack intros and stuff like that. The first thing I wanted to make was an ad-lib emulator. And from that point onwards, I thought, that's a little bit boring. So let's go to the DX7. And from that point onwards, I was like, okay, there's DEXED and there are multiple DX7 emulators. So that's not very interesting either. And that's why this became a behemoth, as I call it, because it does all kinds of things that don't necessarily have anything to do with FM anymore. But yeah, like for example, the key scaling feature that I explained a little bit earlier, where you can define like a certain range of keys on which an operator works and fades in or out exponentially. That's definitely a feature that Yamaha uses on their FM lines of synths. So that's from there. And then there's the super saw that I completely try to recreate as truly sounding as possible as the Roland JP8000 does. That's also why if you open the detune up a little bit too much, it will get dissonant. But that's how the GP8K sounds. So that's exactly how I want it to be. Otherwise, yeah, of course, there's the whole phase modulation thing and stuff like that. But the more I worked on the synthesizer, the less about FM it became, basically. Another question, maybe. I'm sorry if I'm asking questions instead of just having like a complete story prepared for all of you, but I personally think that I can talk up a storm about all of the things I had to put together, but it might be more interesting to know what you want to know, like what are weak points, strong points, and just the things you're interested in and why I made certain decisions. Is there anyone who has a question now?
I might be interested in seeing some of the FM code, specifically how the oscillators are communicating with each other, because that seems like a challenging thing to really get right. So I don't know. I'd love to hear more about that challenge.
Oh yeah, absolutely. No problem. So after a while, I kind of split all these primitives up into different objects, and I think the most basic one is called the phase object. That's basically an oscillator that doesn't have a certain characteristic or anything like that. It's just a yeah, it is what it is. It is an oscillator, and it doesn't have a certain timbre or whatever to it. And these phase objects are in turn used to drive this class, which is the oscillator itself. And as you can see, there are quite a few waveforms like sine, cosine, and polytriangle, polysquare. Poly here stands for a technique called polyblep, which some of you might be familiar
Yeah,
with.
we use that in our synth.
Yeah.
So we're very familiar.
Yeah, it's not ideal, but it's fast and it sounds good enough for me. And then there are a few oscillators that are like quite specific, like the supersaw or the sample and hold for the LFOs, or the noise ones that don't use poly, but everything that's prone to aliasing or aliasing. I'm never sure what the right pronunciation of this word is. Tend to use the poly versions. And so, as you can see, this oscillator object has a phase object, which is like the most used one. And this is probably not the most optimal thing to do, but like there are like these specific oscillators that we have. They are encapsulated in the class as well, and I'm not very happy with stuff like this code wise, but let's just suffice to say that even without using SIMD instructions, which is something that I'm quite good at given my background in graphics and in software graphics coding and stuff, I never used that and never had to use it, so I didn't really have a reason to remove this yet. So we have an oscillator that we can initialize, and then we have functions to bend the pitch, set the frequency, we can reset it, which resets the phase. And of course, it's laced with assertions because I am an assertion kind of guy, and Joshua knows all about that. And there are a few specific functions in there, like that are like related to the special oscillators, like the supersaw and the sample and hold. But let's take a look at the voice class, because that's basically what's at the heart of everything. And it's not one of the prettier ones. But basically what this class does is have an amount of operators, which is variable, but it's 6 in like the implementation that I've just shown you. and I'll show a little bit more later on. But and then there's just a whole lot of parameters, and they basically came to me organically. And one thing that I think is very important, and I touched on this before, is that everything is interpolated, everything that matters. So that means that there's like very little space for transients or aliasing, and simple things like is carrier. Well, you've seen the button in the interface that says that it is an operator carrier or not. Well, this is basically the boolean that carries that data. The LFO is contrived and stupid. You can do interesting things with it, but we have the plan to actually remove the global per voice LFO and give every operator its own simpler LFO. But that's work in progress. And then, as I said, like every operator has a filter, and every voice has a filter. And what I used for the operators are the biquads, because A, they're a little bit cheaper to calculate than an SVF, and B, because it's far less likely that you're going to sweep the frequencies and stuff like that. You can do it, but as we, well, I'm not sure, but let's just say that it's known that due to the complexity of an SVF filter versus a biquad, an SVF filter tends to respond much better to frequency sweeps, whereas a biquad can go into numerical instability much quicker. So the voice filter, which is something that I think musicians, and that might be a mistake on my part entirely, musicians might use a little bit more, is like tweaking with the voice filter. So I want that to be as stable as possible, so that you can actually attach a MIDI controller and just pull it open and shut and do whatever you want. Whereas the filters that are used for example, EQing and for per operator filters, they are biquads, simple biquads. But let's just go through the voice code. And let's just very slowly go through the voice render loop. So when we're going to render a voice, I tend to use the function name sample, and this is a stereo one because this synthesizer is stereo. Of course, using different parameters, you can make it sound like a mono synth, but, and I don't mean monophonic, but really mono. And this function, first of all, checks like, all right, so is this voice idle, or is the sample offset greater than 0, which means this is tied into delaying when an operator actually starts to work, which gives you the opportunity to layer like operators on top of each other in temporarily, like a plate that sort of strain your fingers kind of sample first. Anyway, then there's a bunch of assertions. Then we're going to calculate the LFO. Then we're going to evaluate the pitch envelope and the pitch bend. And then we're simply going to go over all the operators. And we're going to keep track of a mix, a carrier mix, because obviously not all operators are either enabled or are a carrier. Carrier meaning that they output sound. And this is where you can see that I constantly sample things that are temporarily interpolated. It's quite a lot of code, but basically what it does is it oscillates, and then what it does is it takes a phase shift from the modulator samples, and that's basically this is where the FM comes in.
So when you say you're sampling, is that basically like a buffer that you are, a certain amount of samples per second that you are copying and recording? Is that basically what you mean?
No, it's basically a way to ensure that every parameter and every feature sounds the same sonically. Well, not exactly the same, but like between different kinds of sample rates. For example, when I started audio coding in the game industry, the first middleware that I had to deal with was Wise. And since I was sort of the DSP guy, I was tasked with making plugins. So the first thing I did obviously was look at, all right, what are their sample plugins that they have for us? And something that I found baffling a little bit, to say it nicely, is that in their examples, they interpolated, like, when, let's say, a certain value came in, a value A, and it had to go to a value B. They went from A to B depending on the amount of samples that we are being processed in the block size of the render call of the plugin. Now that's obviously wrong, because if you're going to do that at 44.1 and 69, for example, 96, sorry, you're going to get a completely different result. Do we agree, or don't we?
I'm confused. So you're saying it's the same block size regardless of what sample rate it's running, is it, or what block size it's running? Is that basically what you're saying? Or I'm confused.
What I'm saying is that sample rate is well, it has its relevance in certain areas, but let's just say that if I tweak a certain feature in my synthesizer, and a difference in sample rate would mean a difference in how that feature sounds, then we're on the wrong track. So let's say I have a distortion value, and that distortion value is 1 at first and 3 at last. I want that to go from 1 in 3 in the same time space. I want to do that I want to interpolate in terms of time, not in terms of amount of samples, because the amount of samples and the amount of time are two completely different things. And that's why I use that kind of interpolation almost everywhere, so that, like, the best I can, the synthesizer sounds the same, regardless of your sample rate. Because of course, when you're making a synthesizer in hardware, it's quite, that's kind of akin to coding a game for a console. You know what kind of hardware you're dealing with. You know that if it doesn't crash, it doesn't crash, etc., etc. But when you're dealing with different kinds of platforms, you all get different kinds of hardware to deal with, and, for example, different kinds of sample rates. So, and this is the same in synthesizers, as far as I see it, at least. So let's say even a frequency sweep would sound completely different if you only use the amount of samples to determine how long it takes to go from, like, let's say 40 hertz to 400 hertz or something like that. So that's what happens. Now, when we've done the frequency modulation, if that's something that you want to do at all, because the synthesizer can, yeah, it is also usable in without using any of that. We have feedback, which is something that I'm not too fond of, but it's a typical FM feature. So I still put it in there. And then we have LFO for the pitch. We have vibrato. We have a pitch bend. And all these factors are combined into one. And I have these features like pitch bend and modulation, and they are directly mappable onto the controls that you have on your, well, what have you, but let's say your keyboard, because like I said, this is, yeah, supposed to be an instrument. Then we have low frequency oscillation tremolo, which is based on the LFO. Then we apply the envelope, and the envelope is based on Bezier splines. It's a complete ADSR. Then we have a little bit of distortion. I have a lot of that. And then, is there a filter for this particular operator? Yes or no? Then we store the sample if necessary for modulation, and we also filter it if necessary. And that's important because, yeah, obviously, with phase modulation, I need to be able to access like the output of each operator without all the bells and whistles on that come with like a carrier sound. So that happens, and then well, this is not really worth interpolating. Explaining. There's like a gain envelope that I output through the main interface, and that you can use to have, like you have seen in the interface, the VU meters for each operator. Then there's panning, then there's mixing, and then there's a global amp per voice, and that's like the volume on the left side that you saw. And once I've rendered all these voices, yeah, it depends. It really depends, because it can go up to 128. Once I've done that, can I not just move this a little bit so I can scroll through this a little bit easier? Anyway, what it first does is it just renders the voices, then it applies, then it mixes them together, then it applies the effects. Like I said before, everything has been built from the ground up. So there's a delay line, there's filtering code, and I would be the last one to admit that I used, certainly in the beginning, filtering code by, for example, Nigel Redmond and Music DSP, and some guy called Fred Corvest, who created an implementation of the SVF. But over time, like I explained in the previous podcast, is that I had to tweak these filters to accommodate what I wanted to do, and that's how I actually got to learn about how they actually worked. But I would be a little bit of like what I've seen in a lot of synthesizers, open source synthesizers as well, is that there's obviously code in there that I recognize immediately, that I've seen before. And as opposed to removing things and changing variable names and stuff like that, what I do is I say, all right, I've used this code, I've learned how it works, this is what I've changed about it, this is where it comes from. And I think that's the honorable thing to do. Be respectful of the work that others have done before you, to enable you to actually make something. Because when I built this synth initially, like I said before, there were many things, especially filter theory or like for example 24 dB ladder filters that I really didn't understand quite yet, but I did want to have them in my synthesizer. So I respectfully took and credited the, whenever possible, by the way, licensing wise, the code that was available. And over time, like I said, I needed different kinds of characteristics there, and that's where I started learning more about them. But I think that's a little bit of a hypocrisy that I sometimes see in synthesizer development, where it's like, oh man, you actually just took that code and you changed a couple of variable names, and now you're trying to pass it off as your own. Just don't fucking do that. Be a man about it, or a woman, or whatever. Sorry about that, but be fair about what you're doing, and credit where credit is due. Modify code the way you want it to, and I think it's especially important to like, for example, here, say what did you change and why, and it all comes down to a matter of respect, and just like don't carrying your ego into the game, and just allowing yourself to be able to say, all right, so I learned from this, and then I'm going to acknowledge that. But now I'm talking a whole lot again. So where should I go next? I find it hard because there's a lot of stuff in here that I can opine on and go on about.
There are actually a couple questions from the chat.
Yeah.
So, Black Martini asks, what are some similarities and differences between graphics and audio programming now that you've had some time in audio and you come from a graphics background?
Oh, that's actually a very interesting question, if you ask me. DSP is DSP. And if we're going to look at, and now I'm just going to talk about 2D rendering, for example. Let's take an easy example here. We all know what a blur is, right? In Photoshop or what have you. What does it do, a blur? Joshua, answer me, please.
Filters.
What does it do to an image? What does it actually do?
Blurs it.
Yeah, so it dampens the frequency rate, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, there you go. So when you do that in a single dimension, basically all you're doing is the same kind of thing, but you're doing it to an audio signal. You're taking away the peak frequency changes, and like that's one example that always stuck with me. But it's not that cut and dry. I mean, there are a lot of overlaps, and filtering is a big one of them. Oscillation as well. For example, let's just not just only old school demo scene plasma effects, but also like modern shaders use, for example, noise sample and hold kind of style, and sine and cosines to, like, give a certain graphical output that looks a little bit different, or animates, or what have you. So there's just mathematically there's a lot of overlap. On the other hand, there is a lot more calculus in DSP than there is in graphics coding. But certainly when we're looking at what I'm currently doing for a living, which is mostly spatial audio, it helps that to understand how to, like, for example, trace rays in a 3D environment that exists of voxelization environment and stuff like that, and couple that with the knowledge that you have about DSP for audio, so you can like create the effect that you're looking for as a combination of taking like the 3D environment into account and then giving the sound engineer or engineers the possibility to use that kind of data to actually filter what the resulting sound is eventually. And both things are things you have to code. So they complement each other. But there's also, like I said, an enormous overlap. DSP really feels like doing the same thing as you would do in 2D graphics coding, or even 3D, but 2D mostly. But you're doing it in one dimension. And even stuff like discrete cosine transforms or FFTs, they come back in compression schemes as well. For example, like PNGs or JPEGs. So there's just a lot of common ground there. Did I answer that remotely okay, or is there a follow-up?
No, I think that's good. We have a question from Tim Brown. So we talked a little bit about this on Friday about focusing on testing and audio programming, and how would you go about testing the effect of some processing on an audio signal? So maybe just a basic overview. I know that could be just a talk in itself. But...
All right. So what I told you on our last conversation is that one thing, and then we're going high level first, especially in games, that we'd like to do is to take people that don't necessarily are part of our team or our sub team, but have like different disciplines, and just give them a good pair of headphones and give them a couple of scenarios and have them like play through the game a little bit and then listen to it and give you feedback like, does it sound all right, or is there something that sounds definitely off? Because like when you're making something yourself as a albeit like purely yourself or as a team, you can get blinded to your own faults. Like you can, it's the same thing with DJing, you know, if you're playing for too long, you or making music or whatever, you quit hearing the error in your ways. And so that's a way that we would try to get some feedback. Then, of course, testing wise, let's take the filters again, rendering them and enabling all kinds of exceptions for the processor at hand, for example, to see if we get a blast into any numerical faults. It's kind of hard to test audio, especially because your ear is the only instrument I think that actually counts. But you know, there are ways to detect, for example, when like there are transients in your signal or a volume goes out of range all of a sudden. And it's especially helpful if you have data from previous runs from the same like kind of code path or algorithm, so you can do kind of a comparison. But still, testing in audio, I think it's quite hard. But we try to do as best as possible, and building upon like the normal testing schemes that we have for all the primitives that we use in coding, mathematical primitives like vectors and matrices and whatever, and all that kind of stuff, and running debug builds and having assertions triggers. But sadly, my experience is still to this day that I rely too much on just running into problems rather than have them being detected in any kind of way. Because I, at the risk of sounding like an idiot, I don't really know what like a catch-all way would be to detect like what is wrong in terms of what you're hearing, because that's really hard to define, as opposed, like it's even quite hard in graphics, but already quite a little bit much easier. But like, who is to say that, for example, something that sounds completely distorted is wrong? That could be completely what you intended to do, but it could also be a filter being blown up. So I don't have a definitive answer to that. The only thing I can do, I can say, is just use common sense, assert everything you can, try to always try to check that like whatever data comes into your code paths adheres to the domain that your functions are being able to process it. And otherwise, yeah, do as much live testing as you possibly can. And as I said before, in our previous cast again, and this is the least thankful thing about audio programming in games, at least, is that, like I told you, if nobody's complaining, then you're doing a fine job. But you're not gonna have to wait for this here. They're just gonna tell you when it's absolutely wrong, because people are immersed into gameplay and everything like that. And I agree with them. When something feels right and doesn't stroke you the wrong way, in an auditory sense, then it's okay. And even if you make like quite cool improvements, you really have to, like, for example, make 2 videos that compare the situations and let them listen to it, and then they go, all right, yeah, cool. But if you feed them to them, and that sounds a little bit derogatory, but I don't mean it that way at all. But if you feed the rest of your team like what you think is like quite a major upgrade in sound fidelity, and you let them play with it, there's a really good chance that maybe 1 or 2 people or nobody at all is going to say much about it. And that is frustrating at times. But on the other hand, it has become my mantra. It's like, if nobody's complaining, we're doing a good job.
Fantastic. So Eloy asks, is there a specific thing that you would do radically different if you were to implement it from scratch all over again? Maybe something you didn't see coming before.
Are we referring to the synthesizer now?
Yes.
All right. Pretty much everything. Nah, that's not true. But I would probably revise the system that handles key input, node on and node off, and the polyphony and the monophonic mode. I would completely rewrite the voice rendering code, because it's the class is just not beautiful. It's more like a structure and speed. So there, but like I said, we're picking this project up again. Actually, Paul agreed to do that with me quite shortly after we spoke. So we're slowly going to look at, okay, what do we think that sucks, and then make a list of those things and a list of bugs, and then just like gradually go over them. And what we also are looking to do is, like, the interface that I showed earlier, we call it the R&D behemoth because it is. But the engine itself is quite efficient, also in that it doesn't calculate what's not necessary to be calculated, and it's mostly procedural. Apart from the plans that we have, for example, to have an operator be able to get like audio data fed in from another VST plugin, etc. But it's quite fast. So my mate Paul Copes, he comes from a marketing background, but he really quickly picked up on like synthesizer design and even use C++ coding. So he has all these great ideas about like subsets that we can make using our technology. And that's probably what we're going to be looking at next. And I don't believe that doing a complete rewrite is ever the right answer to improving software. Um, Exceptions notwithstanding, of course. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I wish I would have done differently. And it would take hours for me to show you what and why. But I think that if you're a programmer yourself, and that's an assumption, I'm not sure if that's the case or not, but anyway, or a developer or an engineer in any kind of way, you know that like when you're making something and it's a learning process at the same time, you're going to make mistakes and you're going to have to sit with these mistakes for a while, and it's going to take a little bit. It's going to take it takes time for you to pick up on why things can be better and how you can do them better, and then there's the matter of time. But yeah, like I told you before, I made every damn mistake in the book when it comes to synthesis coding, and there are probably more than a few left in this code base as well. So yeah, it's a journey, and I would say be forgiving towards yourself when you're going into new territory, be it graphics or optimization or audio or whatever.
I have one question that I'm going to reserve for myself, and then we'll wrap this part up. I noticed that you use your own assertions, that you've defined your own assertions, SFM assert. How is that different from a regular assertion?
It's not at all, actually. It comes a little bit from the experience that I have developing software in the game industry, and I've also worked in broadcasting and stuff like that. And especially because I've been working for multiple platforms. Like I've developed for at least 15 platforms, but that includes a lot of game consoles and stuff like that. But anyway, I want to be able to implement what an assertion does for each platform, the way I see fit for that particular platform. And that's why I abstract it and make my own macro to implement that assertion for any particular platform, basically. It's yeah, that's basically the only reason that's behind that, to be flexible.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. That sounds great. Niels, thank you so much for that awesome walkthrough.
Yeah, I must be honest with you. I mean, I think I feel it's hard to explain, like especially how these projects, like I just explained, came together, and there are so many details, and I find it hard not to drown into those details. But I hope I gave a little bit of insight, and everyone who wants to contact me is welcome to do so. Maybe you can put my email address in the YouTube comments or something like that. Ask me anything you want, and I'll be more than happy to answer them. And yeah, more often than not, I learn from experiences like that and like this as well. So thank you for having me, and I'll shut off my microphone and I'll listen to our next guest. Thank you very much.
We're going to need you to ask intelligent questions for the next part as well. So we're
yeah, but I'm going to mute first.
I've just realized that there's a little bit of poetry in this meetup that was actually unintended, which is that the first talk was more about team leads and building a company. Second part was about synthesizer, and then third part is actually kind of combining both of those. So building an audio company and coming out with your first synthesizer. And so I'm going to ask our collaborators here to join in asking more informed questions than myself to get this started. So this last part will be a discussion, and I have Adam and Nolan here from Silen Audio. That's Silen without the T. I love the name. I'm sure that's not the first time I've heard that.
Yeah.
So yes. So Adam, you're in Los Angeles, and
Yes.
Nolan, you're in New Jersey, correct?
Yes.
Great. So maybe we could start with how you met. How did you two meet? How did you come up with this collaboration?
Sure. So I put an ad on the Juice forum that I needed a developer, and I had a number of really great candidates that came my way, but Nolan was incredible at what he was able to show me, and he seemed very eager to learn more about the project and like excited about it. So basically our collaboration was born from there. Nolan, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, Nolan, do you want to talk a little bit about your background?
Yeah. So I think I was 22 at that time. So I was pretty young. I'd had like a couple small contracts beforehand. But that was definitely a project that caught my eye because I'm very much a synthesizer nerd. That is my corner of the audio world that I'm like most into. So to be able to like work ground up on something like that was very exciting to me. And I think Adam had a very ambitious, but specific vision that he wanted to do. And I don't know, I think that just resonated with me. And, I was taking whatever contracts I could get, quite plainly, but this was one I was very excited about. And yeah, I think we sort of, our attitudes on things aligned in a lot of ways. And I think that made it work for a long process before getting this product out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So my background is in music. I'm a composer, and my company does video game audio as well. So we do a lot of stuff in the music side of video games. And I didn't have very much experience in C++ or Juice going into this project, but I had a very specific type of synth that I wanted to be a part of building. And so I came to Nolan. Nolan knew a lot more about the core aspects of getting it off the ground than I did. And for the first few months, it was all him. And I was just kind of following along, loosely learning what I could. And then through time, I kind of started to take on larger and larger chunks of the code. And Josh, I want to thank you specifically for your YouTube videos and the community that you have built, because it has been really, really valuable for us and for me personally, learning some of this stuff, some of these core concepts that are very basic DSP that I kind of understood, but didn't fully. Your videos were like exactly what I needed in that moment. So
I I don't want to like kiss your ass too much or anything, but I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that like I wouldn't, there's a good chance I wouldn't be in this industry if your channel didn't exist. So yeah, I wanted to thank you sometime on the stream, but now's the time, I guess.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh, wow. I'm really humbled by that. And one thing that's so amazing and always surprising to me is because I consider myself the kind of the voice of the beginner, as a person who just really made these tutorials, many of them as I was getting started. And in many respects, I'm still very much a beginner. And to see something that where I was able to have a little bit of a contribution, and that you were able to take that and grow it into something that was much larger and
And I think that attitude that you've had since the beginning of like, I'm learning, come learn along with me, that was very inviting to me. And you don't see that a lot with tutorials. It's usually some expert that knows this stuff in and out and almost sort of forgets how to introduce the basics in a way. So I really do appreciate your videos. Yeah.
Thanks a lot. It's very important to me. And yeah, I'm really proud of what the two of you have built. Sounds like it's been a heck of a journey for you. So what year did you actually start collaborating?
2021. So a little over 2 years. I think it was September 2021.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
Nolan said I was 22 years old, like that was 10 years ago.
Yes.
Like that was 10 years ago. I'm sure that through the journeys that you've had so far, that it must have felt in a lot of ways like 10 years ago, and that you were, from a development standpoint,
Yeah.
I can imagine
Yeah.
how much come along since then.
Yeah, I know Niels was talking about, the things I would do differently. Like, it's unbelievable the things I would do differently, like both from working on this project and other projects as well. It's like, I feel like, my own growth in terms of being a developer it's so markedly different. And it's not that I'm not happy with how things came out, but I would be lying to myself if I said there weren't big things that I would do differently if I did it again.
Mhm.
That's awesome. So what would you do differently if you had to do it all over again?
So I think Niels was talking about before how essentially, or maybe it was before we were on the stream, but essentially a big favor towards modularity in code writing. And I think that's something I want to emphasize more in myself, and trying to sort of sever dependencies and just have classes do what the class is supposed to do, and not and basically only worry about what it actually needs to worry about. So I think just sort of having that philosophy more well ingrained and sticking to that as the code base continued to grow, and really being like deliberate about the creation of the creation of different objects and classes and the dependencies that are created. I guess that's like the general lesson that I feel like I would apply going back on it.
May I chime in for a second?
Yes.
Like I've been coding since the begin 90s. I think at first you're a beginner and you grow and you grow, and then you get to a certain point. Let's just speak for myself. I don't want to speak for anyone else, but I got to a point where I got to be what I suggest is sort of a novice level. And at that point I thought I knew everything. And that was around 2006, 2007, also when I got like a lead programmer position, that I really had a hard time doing in the beginning, because I was a real pain in the ass for my team the first few months, until I was recalled by my boss and told, like, you got to chill out and do this differently. But anyway, the more I age, the more I realize that there's so much I don't know, and there's just no, like, whatever you do in life, ego is usually one of your worst guides.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And it reminds me, this a little bit on the subject, a little bit off the subject, but back in Roman times, when Roman generals or emperors would come back from winning great battles, they would hold a thing. It was basically like a parade. I can't remember what the actual technical name for it is. But basically it'd be a celebration. It'd be like a 3 or 4 day long celebration where they would celebrate them coming back from the battle. And so you'd have this emperor that would be riding down the street in this chariot, and supposedly they actually had a person that was whispering in the emperor's ear. So he would be holding the crown, the olive leaf crown above his head, and also whispering in his ear that you are human. And that, I think, is really something that speaks to what we're talking about, is that no matter where we ascend to, we're all human, and we're all still learning, and that we can all be humbled at any given time, no matter where you may ascend to. So it's important to always stay well grounded, and to remind yourself that.
I'm not sure if humbled is the right word, but it's just that you should be unassuming, or you should be anything, but I'm trying to be as unassuming as I can. I mean, there's like guys 10 years younger than me or more or whatever that I can talk to, and they come with some kind of idea of some kind of solution. I'm like, all right, that's cool. I never thought about it that way. And you know, so there's no ideally there's no place for ego. Though on the other hand, ego does drive you to do things every now and then.
Yeah, everything is balance, isn't it? I like that word, unassuming. That's great. This is getting a little bit more into humanities, but I think that it comes back to a great point, that when it comes to this industry is that we're all human, and that we're all and that whatever you may do in this world, it is about human connection, isn't it? If you're building an instrument, that's about human connection as well. I think that that's beautiful, and it's great that this discussion has kind of poetically come around to what Jens has actually talked about, which is connection. Connection between the people who are actually making the products, connection between yourself and the customer that you're trying to provide with a new with new capabilities and new ways of expression, and that it's important for us not to lose sight of that. So let's talk a little bit about, so you were saying, Adam, that you started getting more and more into the code base and started writing the code. So was this something that when you initially thought of the project, you thought, okay, Nolan is going to take responsibility for this code base, and that it organically went in that direction? Or did you always have an intention of, I want to learn how to do this?
I've always had an intention that I wanted to learn how to do this, but I don't think, well, I think I severely underestimated just in general the amount of work the project was going to take. So this is not because Nolan did an incredible job, but we had so much in front of us to get it to actually ship, that I wound up just being like, okay, well, there's this big hole that needs to be filled, so I'm just going to figure out how to do it. And I was happy to. I was very interested. I mean, that's the way my brain works. If there's a problem, especially if it comes to audio and DSP, like my brain naturally just gravitates to like, okay, well, let's figure it out. We'll solve it. But I'm not sure I expected to spend as much personal time on it as I wound up doing, but that's just because of the enormity of what was in front of us. But I'm happy that I did, and I really enjoyed the process, and I felt confident. Obviously I'm still a novice in many respects, but I felt confident in what we accomplished by the end of it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. I speak as a person who, largely does what Jens does, which is leading teams. And one thing that I've learned is that when you volunteer to go in and do a piece of code, that it can be very difficult to then step back out of that, because inevitably things don't work right the first time around. And then because it's your code, you're kind of stuck with that responsibility. And, it really is difficult to pull back out of that and go back into your more strategic role, because it's like, oh, this thing isn't working properly. I need to, Adam, we need you to go back in there and we need you to fix it, because you're the only one that knows how it works.
Yeah, that has been a challenge, especially over the past 6 months or so, right before we put it out into the world. Juggling, because I have a lot of other responsibilities. We have other contracts that have nothing to do with this. So juggling that, and mentally, not even just from a time perspective, has definitely been a challenge. Something that I'm still working on getting on top of and getting comfortable with. But yeah, for sure.
That's cool. So when you talk about it, you're talking about Infinite Flow, which is the synthesizer that you and Nolan have created. Shall we?
Yes.
Shall we do a sound demo? I'd love to see it.
Sure. So at its core, I've been calling Infinite Flow sort of like a love letter to polyphonic synths of the late 70s, early 80s. And, it's not deeply revolutionary in terms of digital synthesis, but in my opinion, what we really focused on is what's called per voice variance, meaning every voice you hit is off in a slight way. And that's kind of what you can control with this slop knob. And in my opinion, this is an deeply overlooked aspect when we talk about what analog synths sound like, what gives them that tone that a lot of people chase after. I think not enough people are focusing on this. So this was sort of an attempt at creating from the ground up a synthesizer that really honors voice variants, but also has a deeply modern way in terms of making modulations, and is not just a direct copy of an old synth. So that's the intention. So we have we have different wave shapes and stuff like that, different oscillators. This is sort of like a macro section, so you can do sort of like super saw kind of stuff if you want to do that. We have a filter class, and I'll just talk about the slop because I think that's the central part of what makes it sort of unique. So right now this is zero slop, so everything is digitally sort of perfectly aligned, and that's, most software synths sound like that to some degree. But then if you start to dial in the slop, what you're going to hear is the individual oscillators are going to start to detune a little bit, like in a super saw sort of a way. But also, if I start to hit a chord, the chords are going to start to detune against each other, or each voice is going to start to detune against each other to make the chords. So I'll just do a fifth. And obviously you can go too far with it. We want you to be able to go too far so that you can bring it back and find that sweet spot. So this is 100% slop. So this is actually a model. Everything in here is a model of an actual synth that we measured. We went to play with a whole bunch of polyphonic synths. We measured them really, really carefully. And the users can select their own slop models, or they can make their own if they're that kind of a nerd. But they can select their own slop model. We have like Jupiters, Oberheims, Prophets, stuff like that. And so this is what we actually measured, and then this is 200%, so double that. And this is with no other modulation or anything else going on than that. And then from there, we just built a polyphonic synth on top of that. So, everything is modulatable if you want it to be. You can right click and you can adjust the modulations as you need to. There's also a mod matrix over here that you can mess with as well. So that's a super, super nutshell of what's going on in the synth. I'm sure there's a lot that I could be talking about, but I don't know. I don't want to get into every single parameter of everything. And then we have a ton of different pads. We're planning a patch update for in a couple weeks, but we have I think about 90 patches right now that come free with it.
I think that like first of all, I'm impressed with what you're doing, but I also have the feeling that we share a couple of the same ideas. Though I'm very impressed with like how you handled that slop thing, because I myself just implemented it as jitter, and that means there's like a certain, well, also modifiable amounts of error that are introduced to certain signals, like oscillator offsets and what have you. But the way you did it, you could see me, and I did that on purpose, just taking a picture with my phone camera, just so you could see I was stealing your idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's open. It's open. We're not hiding anything. Nothing. We don't claim that anything is completely revolutionary. This is an evolution of a lot of ideas that have existed before it in synthesis. But in my opinion, especially in the software space in a modern way, not enough people are focusing on this. So that's, I almost didn't even want to make a synth. If it had already existed, I probably never would have spent 2 years on it. But it was like, well, I guess I looked, oh yeah, I've made a big Eurorack patch where I tried to do it. I did it in VCV rack. I did it in Reaper with basically I tried everything I could to get the sound I was looking for before being like, all right, well, we're going to invest 2 years and a decent amount of money into the process. So yeah, Niels.
A good friend of mine is like an orchestral composer and quite an expert at just music in general. And he was the guy who hammered that idea into me, like you need to introduce error.
That's exactly right. And I think that's where my brain started to pay attention to it, because if you listen to a string section, violins, these are some of the best players you'll ever hear in the world. They are, they've spent decades perfecting it, but still on either side of the perfect note, there's going to be a little bit of spread. And we like that. Our ears as human beings, I think we like that over, mathematical robotic precision. I mean, there's room for mathematical robotic precision in some types of music, but in what I'm talking about, especially orchestral and film scoring and stuff like that, we like a little bit of slop. Now, Dave Smith, as far as I can tell, invented slop or invented the word. I mean, it was first, and people correct me if I'm wrong, but it was first introduced in his synth, I think the Evolver, in about 2002.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, again, we're not taking credit. We're just evolving things that already existed before us in a new way.
Can I ask you what type of random generator do you use?
Sure. So nothing in the presets are random. These are all carefully measured. But to answer your question, we also have this ability to randomize. You can randomize everything, or you can randomize individual lanes if you want to. And specifically, we're using what's called normal deviation or normal distribution. So what that means is that, so right now it says random standard deviation. So like this, I'll do an oscillator and I'll say it's 0.5. I don't know why that's not working, but anyway, so right now that's going to be random distribution, standard distribution of 0.5 on either side of zero, essentially. And then there's and because it's normal, that means like most things are going to be a lot closer to zero. It's not going to be a perfect spread between 0.5 and negative 0.5. It's going to tend towards a lot closer to the 0
I
point.
believe it's a bell curve, right?
Do you mean a Gaussian distribution?
That's right. It's in the standard. It's called normal in the C++ standard library, but it's a type of Gaussian. Exactly. Yeah. So it's like a bell curve. So it's going to tend a lot closer to the thing, but also because it's Gaussian, you can have outliers. So you can go a lot farther than 0.5. So that's why we introduced a limiter as well. I don't know why it's set to 40, but we could set it to like 3. So that way it would be 0.5. Most things are going to be close to 0, but then if something goes really out there, it'll get cut off. It'll stop it at 3 or negative 3.
I really love this. This is such an impressive way to expand on the idea that we had as well, but never really, like, we never went this far, and this looks very cool.
Cool. Yeah. And and then whatever this is set, the slop then is a percentage of that value. So if it's 50, then it would be 50% of that value right there. So so I mean, it's been good. And right now we're just trying to get the word out. We want people to get their hands on to play with it. I'm feeling good. It's in a good place in terms of bugs and all that kind of stuff. It's very stable, which was a journey getting there. And
Let's
the people
talk about that. So I'm actually curious about that.
Sure.
Because that's something that so many smaller companies deal with, is how to actually eliminate bugs, how to actually test those out. So can you talk a little bit about that process?
Sure. So luckily we had a few people who were very eager beta testers who were kind of friends of mine, and people who I've kind of put it out in a small community that I'm part of. Do you want to try it out and tell me what's wrong with it? And they were able to help us find a lot of them, which was really, really valuable, especially in DAWs. Some DAWs introduce things that other DAWs don't in some operating systems, and that's still a problem that we haven't. There are some DAWs that we still have tested only a tiny bit, and we probably need to spend some more time in, but we're doing our best trying to get the core 7 or 8 that people seem to really, really use. But and then it's not all DAWs allow you to profile or attach it in debug mode in the same way. So some of them are pretty easy. Reaper, Cubase is actually pretty easy. You can just put some breakpoints and stuff like that, and you can find the bug usually pretty fast. But some of the times we just had to poke around until we think we found it, and a lot of my bugs came from not destructing listeners and not sending things to null pointers the way I should have. So those are just me being less experienced than I should have. And pointers, dangling pointers and pointing to memory addresses that get deleted. That was because we're allocating the voices dynamically, and all of our mod connections are talking to the individual voices. So if you have a connection, you have 8 voices and you have LFO connection that's going to all of them somehow, and then you change it to be 4 voices. What's happening is this 4 getting deleted right away, and you could have a race condition where they are still pointing to dead voices. So that was definitely a source of a lot of our challenges. Yeah.
Nice.
Can I ask you something?
Sure.
I would love to test this synth, and I would like to repay the favor by sending you a version of mine. But all right, let's think about that later.
Yeah, send me an email. We'll exchange details. You can send me an email for sure. But also, any users can go onto our website, and you can download a somewhat restricted. It's free to run for 15 minutes, and then there's a white noise blast, and you can close your session down and reopen it, or close your plugin down and reopen it. And so anybody can try it out. Yeah.
Cool. Another aspect that I really like about this is the aesthetic. So the aesthetic is different. Looks like you went for something that wasn't that was a little bit off the beaten path when it comes to the way that what users interact with this. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have there's a really good composer. His name is Jeff Rona, and he's been a boss of mine and kind of a mentor of mine. He's and he was on the original MIDI development team in like 1984 or whatever. So he was Hans Zimmer's synth programmer. He knows synths. And I showed him our old build. This is probably about a year ago. And he was just like underwhelmed. And one of the things he specifically told me is that the UI itself should tell a story. Like the moment you open it up, there should be, may not be you might not get everybody, but there should be something that you are attempting to evoke with your design decisions. And you need to find out what your story is, and you need to then find a visual way of reflecting that. So that took a little bit of wind out of our sails, because we had already been a year and a half into development, or a year, and we had to redesign it and that required not just visual, but a lot of code changes. But he was right. And one of the things that I have a designer friend of mine that helped me. But a lot of this actually I did myself. But one of the things that my designer friend, we were going back and forth with, he said, what are some like movies that evoke the period and the sound and the vibe that you are going for. So one of the movies that I said was War Games, if anybody's ever seen that movie.
Oh yeah.
And yeah, and so War Games, and everybody can look it up. It's got a lot of flashing lights and DOS kind of stuff and red and blues and stuff like that. So
I
that
also
was,
personally, I very much, when we were talking through this, I know it's blue instead of green, but very much like the sort of like computer aesthetic of Alien 1979.
oh yeah,
I get
yeah,
a
I
lot
think
in this
that's
too.
yeah, I think that's that period from 79 to like 84 or whatever is really the era that we are trying to evoke in this. And I'm pretty happy with it. I think we mostly pulled it off. So
Yeah, I love hacking days when they used to say hacking into the mainframe.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
We're hacking into the mainframe. I love that. Yeah, it
Yeah.
reminds me a little bit of the first Star Wars arcade game. I don't know if you're
Oh yeah, I do. I know exactly what you're. Yeah, exactly. And
sorry, we can laugh all we want about mainframe programmers, but like these are the guys that get like $600 an hour being pulled off the golf course because
Yeah.
nobody else remembers how to code for a goddamn IBM 16360.
That's right. And on some level, everything we rely on, if you keep going, is living on some IBM, from the 80s. So yeah, absolutely.
fantastic. Jens,
I actually have a question for you guys. So programming synths, in my experience, they synths tend to be a little bit CPU hungry. So is there any particular parts of the code that you had to optimize by hand to especially when running multiple voices and so on that take up a lot of CPU power?
You first, Adam, or should you and Nolan go first?
Well, I was going to say, so we essentially implemented, you can go to it, I guess, I think these are sort of synth speed setting. So basically what that's going to do is it's going to update parameters faster or slower, because of course parameters can dynamically change, whether they're being modulated by something or affected by an envelope or affected by automation. So that parameter is going to essentially do is change the refresh rate of those parameters. So if someone wants every little detail and wants it to sound amazing and they have the machine to do it, they can crank that thing up. But if
also,
their machine can't handle it, it could get turned down.
99% of sounds, you won't hear the difference. So the difference, but from a CPU perspective, it's going to be massive. So the difference between that and that is going to kill some systems or not. And unless it is like a kick drum where it's an ADSR that is changing like 96 semitones very, very rapidly, you're just not going to hear the update at all. So there are a few sounds that if you really need them, you touch that. But for almost anybody, and I never touch that knob, you don't need to worry about it.
Neither do I. I leave it at 12 o'clock all the time. But yeah.
So the way I approach this is that like I have a background in like the first language that I mastered after Quick Basic was basically x86 assembly. So all I ever did to ensure that like the synthesizer I wrote is relatively fast is check your basics. Branching, which can be a bitch if it's unpredictable, so branch prediction. Memory locality, cache coherency. For example, if you have like the implementation of an algorithmic reverb, you have a number of buffers and you have a number of all pass and what is it? Anyway, you have a number of delay line structured filters, and they access each other either parallel or in serial. And if you just allocate one big block of memory and distribute it in the way that it's accessed in a sequential order, you minimize the amount of cache misses you're going to have. And otherwise, it's just common sense is enough. But I can understand that, like, for example, your synthesizer does certain things that requires more data and memory usage than mine does. That makes it a little bit harder to keep it fast. But like, the more procedural you remain, the faster it will be. Like I said, like the first demo we did for our synth, which is 2 years ago or something, like 1.5, 2 years, that was rendered on an now MacBook i5. And we ran in Reaper at least 20 instances of the synthesizer all at once, and it used 25-30% of all the CPU capacity. And all I ever did was just use the common sense when it comes to writing optimal code and then tweaking your compiler nicely. And otherwise, it's just try to be really nice to how you treat memory and stuff like that. And that can become a little hard, of course, when you're using, for example, Juice. And I don't want to crap on Juice in any way, because it's been of great help for us, absolutely fantastic. But it is a style of coding that is very object oriented and is very prone to having memory indirection happening, where you're touching different addresses all of the time. Whereas if you spend a little time thinking about things like, all right, so do I really need to evaluate this? Can these buffers maybe be sequentially allocated instead of separately, and stuff like that? It's just everything that makes the life of your processor a little bit easier is 100% of a win, I think. But I don't see that this is not a slow synthesizer, is it? It's not.
Ours is pretty, I mean, comparatively to it, I would put it in neck and neck with a lot of the other software synths out there. I could reasonably run 30 or 50 on my machine, but my machine's pretty powerful. There are more lightweight synthesizers out there. We're doing a lot of calculations under the hood, and there's only so much optimization on some level. There's only so much optimization you can do. And I'm not saying that we found the limit. I'm sure that we could go further, but we definitely pushed it really far to try to make sure that only the processing that matters right now is happening, essentially.
What was important for me is that, sure, I knew how to optimize things like into oblivion pretty much, but in many occasions I chose not to. And the reason why is that I was still learning how to make a synthesizer, and that wouldn't be any easier if the code was like completely confined into some kind of optimized structure.
Right.
Cool. I wanted to step back a second to the point that you met, because I think there's an interesting story there that maybe other people can gather a couple learning lessons from, which is that for you, Adam, as a composer, finding Nolan, who seemed to be very much kind of at the beginning of his career, talking, I don't know if this is information that you necessarily want to talk about publicly, but one thing that I was curious about, because this is a situation that I see come up all the time, people with a great idea who want to collaborate with a developer. Can you talk, if you want to reveal a little bit, about how that first manifested itself? So did you say, okay, I'm going to finance this? Or did you say, okay, I'm coming into this with a collaboration and then we're going to share the rewards? How did that arrangement look?
So I financed everything from myself. And it's been, I mean, I have a company, we have other work, and I get a lot of work writing music and stuff like that. But I will admit that I think I budgeted about, X, and it was probably X times 2 or 3 by the end of it. So, and that's not even including my time that I personally put into it. So, it's definitely has been a big process in terms of making it all make sense and financing it all and getting it all the way to the finish line. But yeah, funding is tough. I think funding is tough for everybody.
Yeah, that's definitely a challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So Niels had messaged through the chat with a question about how to actually get an audio company off the ground. So this is cool because Jens has talked a little bit about that. And then I actually had a talk that I did about a month ago discussing about just the complexities of creating an audio plugin, just the different things that go into creating an audio plugin that are not the feature writing, that are not the plugin part, and what members of the team are essential for actually creating a successful audio plugin. But can you tell us a little bit about that story of how you actually got it off the ground as a company?
Yeah. So there were a lot of things that I, kind of knew I was going to have to worry about at some point, but I don't think I fully expected the amount of time it was going to take. So, license management was one. We're using, well, actually I shouldn't say, but license management is one. I don't want it's already getting cracked, but I don't want to give people
the Russians have got us, but it's okay.
Yeah. Right. That was one that I knew we were gonna have to worry about, and that became a challenge. Just creating a storefront and creating a system to deliver keys to people after they purchase it, that was very challenging. Signing things, both I knew Apple was going to be a nightmare, but I didn't really predict that Windows was going to be as hard as it was and as expensive as it was. So that was definitely something that I wish I knew more about. And I don't know, what other, there's more. I mean, every step of the way, it was something or other we were fighting to figure out. But yeah,
I would say honestly, like sort of to the point before about like a small company and like being able to test in a variety of systems, it's like you underestimate just how much these small variations could impact it or could make it crash for some reason or another.
I mean, the dream of Juice is to make a single code base that then you can export and it'll just work. And that has definitely not proven to be the case.
I'm still a proponent of the kind of Jobs / Wozniak team in terms of skill sets, that in terms of building a successful creative company, you need to have that combination of the technical that Steve Wozniak brought at the early days of Apple, along with Steve Jobs, who brought more kind of your vision and maybe team building, selling, and so on. I'm hard pressed to think of an example of, or a way that, I'm sure that there are exceptions in the world of people who were just, amazing technical people that didn't have to really get out there and sell or have a really good vision, but their product was maybe so compelling. But I don't know.
Yeah.
What do you think about this, Jens? This is kind of your area. I'm a strong believer in that vision, that combination of vision and technical, and needing to have both of those elements in order to create a successful company. What do you think?
Yeah, there's a lot of elements that go into it, and I don't think there's the recipe for success, because it's as we talked about earlier, that it both has to sound good and has to look good, and the product in itself has to be really compelling, both musically and visually. But it's also about, there's also all the other stuff that you mentioned, Adam, you know, setting up the storefront and all the advertising, you know, do you need it? How much should you put into it? And so there's all these questions when you start up, and usually, you know, in this in our industry, people start with a passion for a product. So the passion is about a product, and you just need to remember there's all the hoo-ha around the product that also needs to happen. And you need to find the right people to collaborate about that if you don't want to do it yourself. And a lot of times you have to drive it yourself, at least that you you know, have to find someone who can make a good design for you, make a good website for you, create marketing material or something like that. I've for some simple tasks, I've used, you know, Fiverr a lot. So just, you know, for really simple things, you can get people to make something for you for cheaps. But if you want to go further, then you need to establish kind of collaboration with someone, or you need to hire someone, as you did, Adam, as you said. So yeah, that's my thoughts on that.
Absolutely. Yeah, marketing is proven to be a challenge that we're still trying to figure out. It's just there's a lot of great people making really great plugins out there, and you know, getting in front of people is a challenge. So
Yeah, I think
And with
another.
with the vision there, that's also something that you need to think about. What is it that you can bring to the market that is unique and that is something different than what is already out there? And you might not do it in your first go. Your initial product might be, you know, as you say, building on top of something that's already out there, or your take on a certain kind of product. But I think that also evolves over time, that you see that you sort of find your niche, find your place in the market, but it takes persistence, and to gain that traction where it all of a sudden shoots off, that's a difficult one to hit.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a recipe.
Yeah.
I think it takes a lot of guts to try and start something up. I mean, it involves risk, both financially and what have you. So I really respect what you guys have done. I mean,
thank you.
Me and my partner, or business partner Paul, who couldn't be here tonight, but like he comes from a marketing background, but he has a love of music. He's quite technical, so he picked up on things quite quickly. And I couldn't have done a lot of things without him. And we still have like a lot of prototypes lying around that look really cool and then could sell like small plugins and stuff like that. But we ran into a situation, both of us, where we just needed steady jobs and money. So we ditched the project and went on with our lives. And actually, like just recently, we're like rekindling the idea of, okay, let's get started again. And I recently saw like new bug reports and issues coming in on GitHub and stuff. So I was very happy to see that happening. But yeah, no, props for pulling through. I gave up at some point, and sure, you can always ungive up and start doing it again, and that's what I damn well will. But yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And I love one thing that I think is also really interesting, and the thing in the success stories that I've seen is that every recipe is a unique recipe. And when I say recipe, I mean when two people or more people come together and they form a collaboration, that's a unique recipe, that's a unique combination that nobody else can replicate. That's unique to you and your story. So, you know, for Adam, you know, for both of you, Adam and Nolan, both of you with the love of synthesis, and I love how that became kind of the point where your collaboration fused and became something that you brought from an idea into a product. Yes, because no collaboration is the same. We all bring different pieces of the puzzle to the mix, and sometimes when it comes to building a team, it's all about just finding what the right puzzle pieces are. When you're trying to introduce another developer into the team, I'm sure this is very much in Yen's mind, but in my mind, I'm thinking, how is this developer going to get along with the team? Just their communication style, just the way that they go about doing things, the way that they bring ideas to the table. Is that going to flow nicely with the rest of the team? But congratulations on bringing it to the market. So do you have more products in line? Where does this look to go next for you?
Yeah, so we've got a few that we're planning. We have a smaller project that will probably be out early next year. But one of the nice things about this is we built a code base. So we have a UI that we're happy with. We have a modulation system that we're happy with. And from there, we can take elements and modify them and not build them from the ground up from there. So we're planning on releasing a filter, which is but it'll not a synth, just a straight filter based on our current filters, but with some modulation capabilities early next year, I would say. And that might even be low price or free for a certain amount of time. Just to get people to feel confident. The goal right now is to get people to feel confident in us as a company and aware of us as a company. So, yeah.
Yeah. So it sounds like that getting to the first product was one of the biggest steps for you in terms of, like you said, there's so much work that once you have it in place that you can just iterate on that, such as the design language, the build systems, security.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Now so much of it is already, the engine has been built, and now we can iterate on top of that, which I'm excited about. So, yeah.
Fantastic. Great. So I'll just give a minute or so for any other questions from our viewers to chime in and ask if they would like to. In the meantime, are there any other questions from here in our crew to ask? Jens, Niels, any other questions on your side?
Yeah, I'm give me a moment. I'm thinking, which
Great.
usually takes a long time for me.
That's okay. In the meantime, while Niels is coming up.
Oh, sorry. Go for it.
I was going to say, if you haven't joined our community already, be sure to join our Discord group. We're trying to break that 10,000 member mark. I've actually got we actually have a very big announcement that we're going to be making. I'm hoping that we can get it in before the end of the week. And with that, there may be a special gift for the 10,000th member. So stay tuned, but I want to keep it. I don't want to say anything too early, but the one clue that I will give is that it's actually been relevant to the theme of this meetup. So I'll let you stay guessing for a couple more days. But go ahead with your question, Niels.
Yeah. I know it's a lame one, but what kind of because I'm looking to buy a new one. What kind of audio adapter, like for example, in the terms of like a Focusrite or something like that, but maybe a little bit pricier, would either of you advise? Because right now I just have a simple Scarlett 2x2, but and that works fine for recording DJ sets and developing a little bit. And I'm actually amazed by what the MacBook Pros, the new ones, have inside of them already. But for PC, is there something that either of you guys you guys could like advise?
So I swear by RME as a company in terms of reliability and drivers. They've never, I've had so many frustrations with interfaces that they're one of the few. There's a few others that people swear by, but my experience has been anything RME, you can pretty much rely on it and, stake your reputation on it. So they're not super cheap. I think the Babyface might be the lowest price, but that's still about $900. But very, very rock solid. So I don't know. Any other ideas?
Yeah, I would just one up on that. RME for the win. And we've also done when doing a lot of like testing on hardware projects, more hardware related projects. RME just rock solid. This sounds like an ad campaign for RME, but no. But also timing wise, you can absolutely expect the latencies to be the same every time over reboots and so on, so that you can measure things. You can actually use it like a piece of measurement equipment, which you can't with a lot of the other audio interfaces out there.
Right, thank you guys for answering. Unless I'm interrupting someone who has
On
another
the little bit
idea.
cheaper side, I have a little. I'm using it here at home. I'm using a little Yamaha mixer, which doubles as an audio interface. I really like that as well. So
Nice.
solid.
I had a question for Jens actually. What, I guess, set of skills or role do you feel like is in demand that you're finding hardest to fill in the audio programming industry?
Oh, what do I think? There are actually people out there with various different skill sets if you look, and I see. Well, as I talked about before, like a product in a product development, it's like 5 and 10% that is the actual core audio stuff, and that doesn't match what people want to do usually. So there's a lot of people that want to do the DSP processing out there and are really interested in that. So there's probably more of those people available, whereas the people who are more focused on UI, getting the products out there and getting them ready, and that's and then people that can do or are interested in data analysis and gathering statistics and gathering information from analytics really, and processing that it's a gold mine if you start putting something out and you build in analytics and start harvesting that and finding people that actually want to look at that and are interested in that kind of statistic work.
Yeah, I actually have some feedback on those things, since we actually have a recruiting and contracting company, so get a lot of queries from companies and people looking for developers. So one is DevOps, so build engineers, people that want to build out, that actually enjoy on a day-to-day basis handling build pipelines, continuous integration, testing,
Absolutely.
Very difficult to find developers who actually enjoy doing that and know and understand CMake and understand different C++ build systems. I would say second I would say is developers that really understand how to develop compelling graphic interfaces, UIs, user interfaces, really understand graphics really well, really understand the difference between rendering graphics on different operating systems. Even rarer than that are people that understand, OpenGL, Metal, that understand graphics optimization. And then the third category, I would say, are just really good C++ developers. I think are a bit tough to find. So I think Juice is a little bit of a double-edged sword in that, as we talked about on Friday, it's done wonders for me in terms of being able to get a better handle on C++ as a language, and it does a great job of abstracting out some of the more difficult bits to do. Even though I would say, if I could have one little criticism regarding Juice, it would be that I would love for there to be more consistency in terms of the classes, in terms of class implementation. So it's like you look at one class, and it's like, this is how you use this class. And then you go to this other class, and it's like, yeah, we got like completely different style on how you actually do your declarations. And I mean, I know that's a very difficult challenge to achieve across multiple developers, multiple years, multiple needs. So, but yeah, so I would say just good generalist C++ developers who know the standard libraries like Boost, the standard library, that really have an understanding how to just code outside of a Juice code base. I think those are very difficult to find.
I don't necessarily agree with you that Juice is like some kind of gold standard in how to approach programming in C++. But we don't have to agree on everything. That's one thing. But other than that,
I'm not saying
I feel that sometimes the focus that programmers tend to have is towards like certain technologies. You just named a few, and oh, don't get me wrong, I'm a big fan of Boost. There's a lot of good stuff in there, as there is in the more modern iterations of the STD library for C++, etc. But in the end, I feel that it's more important that you have like some sort of like connection with the code that you write towards the platforms that you're writing it for, more so than just knowing how libraries work or whatever. Juice is absolutely fantastic, but what I see in the audio industry every now and then is that people kind of take it to be some kind of gold standard of writing C++, and it's not bad, but it's not the only way. That's the only thing I'm trying to say.
Yeah. I would say from me, I don't have the expertise to really speak with any expertise and say whether it's a gold standard or not. What I would say is something that I really champion about Juice is just the abstraction, the abstraction of, being able to have one code base built for multiple formats, built for multiple operating systems. I mean, that's so invaluable. So
we were so happy with it that it could do all that for us.
Yeah.
That we were really willing to take those little few things that didn't sit quite right with us on the chin easily, because it saved us so much time and effort.
Yeah. And also I think that, as far as I'm aware, C++ UI kits are a little bit few and far between. There isn't really a whole lot out there in terms of, really comprehensive ways to do it. So they do provide a good toolkit to get started on that. Even though I will say, I mean, this goes back to my second one: somebody that really understands user interfaces. Customizing Juice classes and the look and feel classes. I mean, that is an art in itself. That is like that is a specialty right there.
Yeah, so everything is inheriting and finding the right thing that is actually sizing the label the way you want it to be. It's hard.
Once again, it's the consistency thing, and I understand that this is something that just goes back years, because getting into the intrinsics of it a little bit, you look at the look and feel class, there are 4 different versions of the look and feel class.
Mm-hmm.
And then you think that if my memory recalls correctly, Combo Box is one of those famous classes that you think it's going to work like everything else, and then it's like, oh no, it was something like under the hood of the Combo Box class is actually a label, so you actually have
pop-up menu or something.
Yeah,
It's a pop-up menu, I think.
Yeah, but one points to the you have to use the Combo Box label in pop-up menu, which doesn't make any sense anyway.
Yeah.
The label ID or whatever it's called.
So happy someone else does this for me.
Yeah. So we actually have one more question from the chat, and then I think we can wrap up. I know it's getting quite late for the people in Europe, and I appreciate you hanging out with us so late. One question from Wave Sequencer is, what amount of advertising have you done, and for which platforms seem more useful in terms of cost and return on investment for you with marketing? I guess that would be for Adam and Nolan, and
so
maybe
right now, virtually none. We are doing everything we can to do organic outreach. Black Friday is going to be a big time, and we are toying with testing some ad campaigns on Facebook and Instagram and stuff like that. So, and YouTube maybe. So maybe in a month I'll have a better answer for you. I'd love to know what Jens has to say about this though.
Yeah, I've been working in large organizations mostly, and so thinking about this has been not my headache, but the marketing department. But definitely had success with in larger companies. It's easier, there's usually a following on Facebook, so that's an obvious way to advertise. And sometimes when you just write that, hey, there's a new product, people will come. And when you're a small company, a startup, you need to make some more noise, I guess. And I think that realizing that there are these the campaign mechanisms or the campaign year wheel, you can say that there's, all right, so we have Black Friday, and then there's Christmas sales, and then it's winter sales and Easter specials, and so there's campaigns going all the time. So you have to maintain that kind of on the marketing side and push for all these, and make people aware that, hey, we're doing things and so on. And also what has worked for us in the past is collaboration with artists. So once you have some kind of collaboration videos to show where you have someone using your stuff, then put it out there, and that works like it has for us in the past worked like a co-promotion. So the artists definitely want to do this, and we also want that kind of attention. So yeah, that can be something to piggyback on some known artists if you can get them on board.
Yeah. So one kind of guerrilla marketing tactic that maybe I could suggest from my experience creating plugins for clients that have primarily been creators, music producers. I would personally, I don't know how much you've done this already, I would personally lean on your Hollywood experience and on that experience as a music producer. And then I would maybe do more generalist tutorials, but then incorporate the synth into the tutorial. So that's something that I've seen a couple producers do with really, really nice success. So it's just an organic, let's compose, a fight scene. And then it's like, yeah. So for this, to create the synth lead, we're going to bring in infinite flow. And that's how we're going to create this unique sound. But I think another thing as well that could help is really, so it sounds like there's been a really cool story that's evolved from the creation of this. I don't know how much you have, but I would love to hear more about that story. So it sounds like you went in, you did a lot of meticulous sampling of the synthesizers. So a little bit more of that information, bringing more of a story around the synthesizer. discussing more about the collaboration and what led to the certain design decisions, I think would also be something that could help.
I agree. I agree with you completely. I mean, some of this we have planned for future content updates and stuff like that. But in terms of leaning on the story, that's something that I think you're 100% right about. And it's hard to know your story when you're living in it, So that's been a bit of a challenge. But I think you're right. There is a story there that we could do better at highlighting. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think honestly, even just like, the conversation we've had today is kind of a good way to think about that. And it's like the whole thing where it's like you can't write your own bio ever. Like you're not supposed to do that, right? You have to have someone else do it for you. And so I think, like Adam's saying, it's important to now that it is at least out in the world. Of course, there's some bug fixes and patch updates and feature updates that might happen, but like now's a possibility to finally reflect on it, because we are such a small group and we don't have an organization that Jens might have been in the past, where there's a marketing department and they have a plan for how this is going to work. And so yeah, I think now is the time to step back and think about seeing it for the first time and how we want to craft the story around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. Sorry. One of my goals, was to get it in people's hands and then begin to really push it, because I kind of knew that everybody was going to be skeptical until they actually saw it. So I kind of always planned on the 6 months after launch as our time to really be figuring some of these problems out.
Yeah, I was going to say, just as a video concept, just something that I've thought of was you put, so the slop seems like one of your main features, and the sampling of that. So I would probably start out with a video, something like, are you even aware that different synthesizers have different degrees of slop or variance, and that, and so here I have a Roland Juno. This is how, then listen to this, listen to how this sounds, versus listen to this Prophet and listen to how this is different. So this is how I'm going to, but are you aware that we have this that where we've meticulously sampled these, but just even making, bringing awareness to that feature set, but doing it in a way that is not actually selling, is actually informing.
So two things. One, we just put out a video very similar to that last week. So I would love for everybody watching this to go to our YouTube page, Silen Audio YouTube, check out a video called Let's Talk Slop, or it's called The Slop Enigma or something like that. And I'm explaining what slop is in as quick and TikTokable way that I possibly can. But I think what you're talking about there, where I actually get a Juno and I record it and I show the slop in it, or a Jupiter, Oberheim, whatever, and then I show how it's the same in our synth. I think that's been something that I've been planning on doing, and I think it's a great idea. So yeah, 100%.
Cool. That sounds awesome. All right. Looks like we've run out of questions, and I know it's getting late there in Europe. And we've been on this stream now for over 3 hours. So yes, thank you for all of your time. What a beautiful meetup. This sometimes all the meetups have been fantastic, but sometimes they're really special ones where I get to the end of it and I think this is really what it's all about. And this has certainly been one of them. So thanks to all of you for that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to thank you for
Thank
the
you, Josh.
opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.
Glad to help.
And that extends to all of you.
Yeah, you too. Nice meeting everybody.
Yeah. So to wrap up, our next meetup is on December 12th. We already have a few guests. One of the guests is going to be Igal Amir and his partner, who are going to be talking with us. They've been on the channel a couple times talking about various things that they've been up to and walking us through their various tricks of the trade. Another really cool independent audio company. And we have a couple other guests as well that are going to be coming in, and we'll be announcing those soon. In the meantime, join the community. Like I said, possible special prize for the 10,000th member. And yes, let's go ahead and sign off. Thank you, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
All right.